Okay, guys. Apologize for that. The software that I'm using decided that it was going to just give up. We are in the midst of Pamela Joe Bondi's confirmation hearing to be our next attorney general. Just a reminder that this is Donald Trump's former lawyer during his impeachment, also one of the Republican Party's biggest scheming uh, lawyers down in Florida. This person is going to be a yes man for Donald Trump. This person is going to do the bidding of Donald Trump. And it's pretty obvious from what we've seen so far from Republican senators who are giving her basically softball questions, leading her by giving her questions in which she can just say yes to. And we have Democrats who are trying to dig deeper into Pam Bondi's legal theory or, her understanding of the American justice system or lack thereof. So let's continue. I think we have Sheldon Whitehouse questioning Bondi. Sheldon is one of he is the epitome of legal, legally wise senators in our Congress. So let's continue here.
About whether you will enforce an enemies list that he announced publicly on television.
Oh, Senator, I'm sorry. There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice.
Thank you. The FBI's, what is the FBI's role in national security and counterterrorism, and how important is that role?
Senator, I believe now more than ever, counterterrorism is so important and vital in our country. We are facing such incredible threats here and abroad. I'm sure many of you saw former FBI Director Wray's interview on 60 Minutes. He talked about the threats that, frankly, again, I don't have my security clearance, but the threats facing us, Senator, from China right now that are so great. Given the sleeper cells within our country.
Given that importance, is it responsible to call for shutting down the FBI's counterterrorism and national security work? And will you, as Attorney General, impede or shut down the FBI's counterterrorism and national security work?
Senator,
2 questions.
Senator, I believe that national security is vital right now for our country on so many fronts. I could continue to discuss many others.
And the FBI's role in that?
And the FBI plays a vital role in counterterrorism
which you
throughout
will
our
or will
world.
not shut down.
I will look at each agency. I have no intention of shutting anything down right now, Senator. I am not in that office yet, and if confirmed, I will look at each individual agency and how it should be managed, but counterterrorism right now in our world is vital.
You have said that Department of Justice prosecutors will be prosecuted in the Trump administration. What Department of Justice prosecutors will be prosecuted and why?
I said that on TV. I said prosecutors will be prosecuted to finish the quote, if bad. Investigators will be investigated. We all take an oath, Senator, to uphold the law. None of us are above the law. Let me give you a really good example of a bad lawyer within the Justice Department, a guy named Klein Smith, who altered a FISA warrant, one of the most important things we can do in this country. So will everyone be held to an equal, fair system of justice if I am the next Attorney General? Absolutely. And no one is above the law.
Under what circumstances will you prosecute journalists for what they write?
I believe in the freedom of speech. Only if anyone commits a crime. It's pretty basic, Senator, with anything, with any victim. And this goes back to my entire career for 18 years as a prosecutor and then 8 years as Florida's Attorney General. You find the facts of the case, you apply the law in good faith, and you treat everyone fairly.
And it would not be appropriate for a prosecutor to start with a name and look for a crime. It's a prosecutor's job to start with a crime and look for a name, correct?
Senator, I think that is the whole problem with the weaponization that we have seen the last 4 years and what's been happening to Donald Trump. They targeted Donald Trump. They went after him, actually starting back in
There it is. There it is. That's why she is in this position. It's just to defend Donald Trump from the witch hunts. Oh no, him paying off Stormy Daniels. Oh, witch hunt. Oh, him sexually assaulting E. Jean Carroll. Witch hunt. Him taking classified documents and ignoring the subpoenas to return them and moving them and lying about him having the classified documents. Witch hunt. Him inciting a violent, deadly mob to try to overthrow our democracy. Oh, it's just a witch hunt. That's what we're getting with Pam Bondi, the Attorney General.
2016. They targeted his campaign. They have launched countless investigations against him. That will not be the case if I am Attorney General. I will not politicize that office. I will not target people simply because of their political affiliation. Justice will be administered even-handedly throughout this country. Senator, we've got to bring this country back together. We've got to move forward, or we're going to lose our country.
Yeah, I think the concern is that weaponization of the Justice Department may well occur under your tenure. And we want to make sure that that's not the case, that you remain independent, that you remain able to and willing to tell the president no when that's necessary to protect the Constitution and the integrity of the department. So that's where I'm asking these questions.
I love how Sheldon Whitehouse just like is so unfazed by Pam Bondi's her these rants that she goes on. No, we're not gonna let that happen. We're not gonna target any person because of their political affiliation. And Sheldon Whitehouse is just looking at her like, this doesn't play here. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. This is being nationally televised and your little right-wing trolls are going to eat up these moments. But, Sheldon's just like, come on, like, give me a break.
We talked in the meeting about the contacts policy that has prevailed really since Senator Hatch sat in that chair and demanded it of the Clinton Justice Department through all the administration since then, with the exception of a brief period under Attorney General Gonzalez, which he corrected and which did not end well for him. There has been a contacts policy that limits contacts between the White House and the Department of Justice to a very few senior officials on each side. In your role as Attorney General, if you are confirmed, will you maintain, defend, and enforce that longstanding contacts policy?
That's a great question.
Senator, yes, I will meet with White House counsel and I will meet with the appropriate officials and follow the contacts policy.
My time has expired. Thank you, Ms. Bondi.
Senator Cornyn. Ms. Bondi, your testimony is music to my ears.
Thank you.
One of the things that I have been most concerned about over the certainly the last 4 years and extending back during President Trump's administration is the weaponization and politicalization of the Department of Justice, which together with the FBI is one of the most important institutions in this country. If people don't trust that their elected officials will faithfully enforce the law or administer equal justice under the law, they've lost faith in America. And that disturbs me greatly, and I know it does you too, based on what you said.
Oh, Cornyn, you slime ball. Donald Trump has been under investigation because he broke the law, and then he went because he was facing the consequences of his illegal actions. So then he turned the past 4 years into a vindictive campaign tour in which he ripped apart the FBI at every campaign rally. At every campaign rally, he threw into question the legitimacy of the FBI, of our Attorney General. And you're going to sit here on your little, what you think is a high horse, and lecture us on the trust in the FBI? Cornyn. Slimeball.
So I'm delighted to hear you say what you have said, but I want to talk about some specific topics. Time is short. First, the border. I believe President Biden and Vice President Harris had presided over one of the biggest humanitarian and public safety disasters in American history. Senator Cruz and I represent a state with 1,200 miles of common border with America. But as you pointed out with fentanyl, what happens at the border doesn't stay at the border. Fentanyl poisoning is the most common cause of death of young people between the age of 18 and 45. We know where it comes from. Yes. The precursors come from China. They go to the cartels. They mix them up, make them look like innocuous pills. And young people take them and die. It's just that simple and that tragic. So there's just so much that we could talk about with regard to the border, but you know, I know people voted for President Trump in large part because of his promise to restore security at the border. Will you do everything within your power as Attorney General to enforce the laws on the books, including the President's executive orders, which I anticipate he will be signing on January the 20th when he is sworn in, and help do everything you can and the Department of Justice can is to restore security to our southern border?
Yes, Senator, absolutely.
One example is, of course, if you come here to the from anywhere in the country and you show up at the border under the Biden and Harris administration policies, you'll simply be released into the interior of the country, either to await a trial date, which may never occur due to the enormous backlog, or you will simply be paroled. And I know parole has a special connotation in the criminal law, but in this context, as you know, it's designed to be administered on a case-by-case basis. Yet President Biden and Vice President Harris had granted parole, that is, released people into the United States on a categorical basis, or anybody who shows up, or because they don't have the detention facilities to keep them. So do you believe Laken Riley would be alive today if President Biden and Vice President Harris had enforced the law and secured the border?
Senator, he should not have been in our country, and then Laken Riley would have been alive. And I don't think it's just Laken Riley. There are so many victims throughout our country. Not only that, we're all familiar with the violent gangs who are coming into our country, walking into our country freely through the open border. The cartels, the gangs, Venezuela's let people out of their prisons. It's been reported. I don't have the security clearance yet to see what's happening, but I know, we all know, there are criminals throughout our country, and it is my commitment to you on both sides of the aisle that I will do everything in my power with the agencies that fall under me if I am confirmed to make America safe again. We have to do that, Senator.
Well, many of us, of course, see classified information on the Intelligence Committee or just generally in our duties as a senator. And so you're not going to feel any better about the blinking lights, the danger that Director Wray has talked about. In my closing moments here, I want to revisit an issue that is of particular importance. 60% of the President's daily brief, which is the intelligence brief that the Director of National Intelligence and the CIA Director delivered to the President, comes from Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. I've called this the most important law that most people have never heard of. I know you have, and you're familiar with it, but I want to ask you a few questions about that. It's been called the crown jewel of U.S. intelligence. And of course, it cannot be legally used to spy on American citizens. And if it is, it ought to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I know you would agree with that. But there have been some, as you know, and as you pointed out to Senator Graham, we have a temporary extension of the existing authorization for the use of the intelligence community to target foreign threats to our national security that expires in 2026. And I'd like you just to confirm here on the record that you will enforce that law and you can support the law as it is written.
Senator, I haven't read the entire 702 in front of you, but I will commit to reading that and doing everything I can to keep America safe again.
Of course you will. So Director Ratliff, who's going to be, I'm going to go to his hearing on for CIA director. Of course, he was confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. Some have argued that in order to query or look at lawfully collected FISA 702 product, that you need to get a warrant requirement in order to show probable cause that a crime, including espionage, perhaps, has been committed. But Director Ratliff has written that a warrant requirement may not achieve its intended objectives and could hinder national security efforts. Do you share Director Ratliff's concerns?
I would read his memo, and I will speak to you after I read his memo, Senator.
Well, we need to have I hope you and I can continue this conversation after this, because I think there's a lot of misinformation with regard to how Section 702 works. I'm happen to be one of the members of the Senate Intelligence Committee. We read that product on a regular basis, and it is not used to spy on American people. I think what's fundamentally missing is a lack of trust in the intelligence community, including the FBI, which I'm hoping you and Mr. Patel can restore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a good meeting this week. Thank you for that. And I appreciated your priorities on human trafficking that you mentioned today, that work, as well as fentanyl and some of your other prosecution experience. We had some similar backgrounds in doing that. And I want to talk about, first of all, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota, one of the premier offices in the country. This office has been instrumental in combating violent crime, dismantling street gangs, taking fentanyl off our streets, enforcing civil rights laws after George Floyd's murder, ensuring victims of fraud get justice. Do you agree that it should be a priority to support U.S. attorneys, frontline prosecutors, and case agents who work hard every single day on our streets?
Senator, I think that is one of the most important things in our country right now, and there are so many good men and women within the Justice Department throughout our country, as well as all the law enforcement agencies. Yes, they work very hard and they will be supported.
I'm concerned about some of the proposals that could put cuts in the COPS program, burn JAG programs. I know you're familiar with those. Senator Murkowski and I lead the COPS reauthorization bill. Just will you commit to continue to support those programs?
Senator, I will read everything about those programs because that is a top priority of mine, and I would love to meet with you on that and Senator Murkowski to support law enforcement and those programs.
Thank you. Independence from political interference is vital to the legitimacy and success of the Department of Justice. I was honestly troubled by some of the answers to Senator Durbin's questions. We will continue that discussion, I'm sure, on the committee about the election. But I want to focus on the investigation, charging decisions. As a prosecutor, I'm sure you had this experience. I would get calls from people, hey, that's just a kid, give him a break. And I remember one answer I gave was, he's 40 years old, he's not a kid. But that kind of interference is attempted all the time. And one of my concerns here, whether it's a call from a friend, a corporate lobbyist, a White House, It has been very clear that the attorney generals of both parties have established clear policies to ensure the White House doesn't tamper with criminal investigations and prosecutions. At Attorney General Mike McCasey's hearing, he made clear that any attempt by the White House, and these are the words, to interfere with a case is not to be countenanced. Any call to a line assistant or to a United States attorney from a political person relating to a case is to be cut and curtailed. Do you agree with this statement?
Senator, yes, I believe that the Justice Department must be independent and must act independently. The number one job is to enforce the law fairly and even-handedly, and that's what will be done if I am confirmed as the Attorney General.
So you will provide an assurance to every member of this committee that the Justice Department will only follow the facts and the law, and the White House will play no role in cases investigated or brought?
Senator, it will be my job, if confirmed as Attorney General, to make those decisions. Politics will not play a part. I've demonstrated that my entire career as a prosecutor, as Attorney General.
Pam, you've demonstrated in just the past half an hour that politics are playing a part. Oh, it was weaponization by Democrats against Donald Trump, all these investigations. I want to make America safe again. Pam, you're using his lines. You're defending Donald Trump. That's all you're doing. This is nothing but political for you. Again, spare us the bullshit. At this point, just come out and say it. You know, just come out and be like, yeah, we don't give a damn. We don't care. We're going to try to get in the way of every investigation into Trump because we know he's going to get impeached again. You know this guy is going to commit crimes, impeachable offenses, while he's president of the United States. And remember, Pam Bondi is the attorney who represented him during his impeachment. So, come on. Just spare us, Pam. Just tell us the truth.
And I will continue to do that if you confirm me as the 87th Attorney General of the United States of America.
In an earlier question, with some of my colleagues talked about China and the risk, yet you have a nominee from this incoming administration, Kash Patel, the pick to head the FBI, have serious concerns about him, has referred to the FBI's Intel Division, which is responsible for protecting us from foreign adversaries like China, as, quote, the biggest problem the FBI has had, and he said that he wants to, quote, break that component out of the FBI. Do you agree?
I have not seen those comments from Mr. Patel. I would review them, but we have to do everything we can to protect our country. Again, Mr. Patel would fall under me and the Department of Justice, and I will ensure that all laws are followed, and so will he.
Okay. There are many decisions made by the FBI director, having seen a number of them do their work, that can be made. While I agree you would be the boss of Kash Patel, I'm not sure that you would be able to intervene with every decision or position that he had or know what he's doing. So let's continue. Do you agree it is a duty of the Justice Department to defend the laws Congress passes? And will you commit to do even when the president may disagree with an act campaigned against its passage or called for its repeal? President Reagan's AG, William French Smith, said the department policy was the department has the duty to defend an act of Congress whenever a reasonable argument can be made in its support. So I'm specifically referring to the 2022 law that I long led that we passed to empower Medicare to negotiate drug prices, major savings for seniors. Will you commit to defend the law against the lawsuits from Big Pharma?
Senator, I was involved in big pharma cases when I was Attorney General of the state of Florida, and I will commit to protect the laws of the United States of America.
Okay, thank you. That would also, same question, with the Supreme Court is going to be hearing a challenge to the Affordable Care Act's coverage of preventative services. And despite the fact that you twice joined suits to have the entire Affordable Care Act invalidated, will you commit to defending this law?
Yeah, I believe this is very different. It's a very isolated, it's different. It's not the entire Affordable Care Act, but I will, it's pending litigation, of course, within the department.
Since the 1990s, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act has protected patients, providers, and facilities that provide reproductive health services. Will you commit to continuing to enforce the FACE Act to address violence and threats against those providing reproductive health care services?
Senator, the FACE Act not only protects abortion clinics, but it also protects pregnancy centers and people going for counseling. The law should be applied even-handedly. Yes, Senator.
So you'll uphold the enforcement of that law?
I'll uphold the enforcement of the law, Senator.
Okay, and I will ask my antitrust questions in the next round. We had a good discussion about that, and I do appreciate the nominee that has been put in place for the Antitrust Division, and there's incredibly important work that has to be done in that division. So
Gail
thank
Slater
you.
is remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank all of my colleagues for abiding by the 7-minute rule. Before I call on Senator Lee, I want everybody to plan on our first break would be about 11:50, and that would be 30 minutes for lunch. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Bondi, for being here today. I, too, share the assessment that Gail Slater is great. Had a great meeting with her yesterday. And just thrilled that you're here and that you're willing to serve. I'd like to talk to you as a longtime lawyer and one who has handled a variety of criminal matters about the Fourth Amendment. What can you tell us about the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirement and why it's so important?
Well, the warrant requirement is so important, which I've dealt with that since I was in my 20s as a state prosecutor. A warrant is so important because it protects citizens' rights, and that's why it's so important.
And it does that specifically because under the Fourth Amendment, you're required to go to a judge, and you're required to show a judge evidence providing probable cause, and based on that probable cause, you can describe with particularity the things or persons to be searched or seized. And on that basis, the judge may issue or not issue the warrant, but without it, you can't get it. Now, this is time-consuming, no doubt, right?
Oh, I've done many of them, yes. It's very time-consuming, Senator.
And there's probably not a law enforcement officer anywhere in the world who wouldn't acknowledge that they could save time if they didn't have to go about it. And yet we require it. Why is that so important that we do it?
Well, it's so important for the reasons you just laid out. When I said I've done many of them, I've approved them and not approved them as a state prosecutor, because law enforcement, there are checks and balances, and law enforcement must bring these warrants to prosecutors to see if there is sufficient evidence. Then after that's done, they have to take them to a judge to have a judge sign them. So there have to be sufficient checks and balances throughout our system.
So even after you as Attorney General, as the chief law enforcement officer and prosecutorial authority in the state of Florida approved it within your office, you still had to go to the judge. And if it was late at night, early in the morning, didn't matter when, you had to find a judge.
All hours of the night. That was more when I was a state prosecutor. As Attorney General, the office of the statewide prosecutor, Nick Cox, would have done that many, many times at all hours throughout the night and woken up many, many judges throughout the state of Florida.
Is there an exception to the warrant requirement that exists anytime it would be inconvenient for prosecutors or anytime national security might be involved?
I'm not certain about national security, but absolutely no for a state prosecutor.
Right. Yeah, there's
no exception.
There's no catch-all exception that just says this is important or it would be inconvenient for the prosecutor, and with good reason.
Right.
We've learned through sad experience over many hundreds of years, not only in our own country, but also in that of our mother country, what happens when you don't have this in the loop. So you've been asked today a little bit about Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, also known as FISA. There are those who have repeatedly assured members of this committee, including myself, that don't worry. Content of phone calls or electronic communications involving American citizens, sometimes resulting in the quote-unquote incidental collection of American citizens' private conversations, don't worry, their Fourth Amendment rights are just fine. And yet, when they incidentally collect the communications of American citizens, either because they're perhaps unwittingly talking to somebody who might be an agent of a foreign power and themselves under 702 surveillance, they get onto this big database. And at times, there are those in the government, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who have gotten into that database and done so, of course, without a warrant, because there currently is no warrant requirement. This has the effect of what we call a de facto backdoor warrantless search. Would you agree with me that that is potentially concerning anytime an American citizen's private conversations are intercepted, stored, whether as an incidental collection or otherwise? They ought not be searched without some kind of probable cause showing. I assume you'd agree with me on that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's important. Sometimes people will defend that by saying national security is involved, as if that's the beginning and the end of the inquiry. That has never been the case, and I hope and pray it never will be the case, because that's not what the Fourth Amendment says, not what it does, not what it ever can be. So it's my sincere hope that the next time FISA 702 comes up for reauthorization, Congress finally do what it has been avoiding for a long time, which is to ensure that this doesn't happen. We've heard again and again from people who, if you're confirmed to this position, will soon be your predecessors, prior occupants of the position to which you've been nominated and to which Mr. Patel has been nominated. Don't worry, we have good people. Don't worry, we have good systems in place. Don't worry, it's as good as a warrant requirement, the internal approval procedure that we have within our system. And yet we've found out time and time again that this has happened, by some accounts, hundreds of thousands of times. These things have been accessed where searches for an American citizen's private communications that have been intercepted and stored through incidental collection have been searched without those safeguards being met, including instances where people just wanted to check on, to cite one example, whether his father was cheating on his mother, or in other instances, doing background checks on someone looking to lease an apartment that he owned and was looking to rent out. This is unacceptable, and we've got to fix it. Speaking of unacceptable, we have seen over the last few years the weaponization of government, specifically within the Department of Justice, against law-abiding Americans. Law-abiding Americans whose offense was something along the lines of, them exercising their constitutional rights, ranging from Catholics attempting to practice their faith, to parents showing up to school board meetings, to people showing up to engage in peaceful protesting outside of abortion clinics. As Attorney General, how will you prevent the weaponization of the Department of Justice against Americans?
And Senator, you just gave the classic example of what's been happening regarding the weaponization. Going after parents at a school board meeting has got to stop. For practicing.
Look, she's lying, right? Parents at a school board meeting who threatened teachers, who threatened other parents. Like, let's be real about the facts here. Bondi reminding us that she will just throw out accusations and offer no evidence.
Your religion, sending informants into Catholic churches must stop.
What about branding parents as domestic terrorists or trying to incarcerate one's political opponent as a sitting president of the United States?
Will stop, must stop. Your Senator.
It is exactly the sort of answer I was hoping and expecting to receive from you, and I look forward to doing everything I can to help get you confirmed. I've been pleased with your answers thus far. I've enjoyed knowing you, considering you a friend for many years, and look forward to the great things you will do as Attorney General of the United States. You have my emphatic support and my vote.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Attorney General Bondi, and to your family and supporters. Thank you for your service, and I look forward to our conversation today. I have a simple three-factor test when considering the executive branch nominees before us. Do you have the qualifications and experience to do the job, policy views to do the job in the best interest of the American people, and the character and integrity to conduct your job, and yours in particular, with the independence that the role requires? You demonstrably have the relevant experience. I understand we will not see eye to eye on some or even many policies, but we had a constructive conversation last week about our shared interest in fighting the opioid epidemic, countering human trafficking, criminal justice reform, and supporting law enforcement. But I need to know that you share a core value, ensuring the Department of Justice remains free from partisan or political influence, in particular by the White House. So I look forward to our discussion about that today. As Attorney General, if confirmed, who would be your client?
My oath would be to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. The people of America would be my client. And it is also my job to advise the president.
Sure doesn't sound like it, Pam. It sure doesn't sound like it. It sounds like you will be working for Donald Trump.
My client are the people of America.
A simple question of constitutional interpretation. Is President-elect Trump eligible to run for another term as president in 2028?
No, Senator, not unless they change the Constitution.
Thank you. One of the concerns I've raised with you is safeguarding the Department of Justice's independence in the face of some promises on the campaign trail by then-candidate Trump that he would use the department to target his political adversaries, or that he might interfere with prosecution. What would you do if your career DOJ prosecutors came to you with a case to prosecute, grounded in the facts and law, but the White House directs you to drop the case?
Senator, if I thought that would happen, I would not be sitting here today. That will not happen. Will not happen. Every case will be prosecuted.
What's funny is, you know, you hear this in every confirmation hearing with almost nearly, you know, every witness who is trying to kind of resist questioning. You hear them say, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to touch that question. Or your question's loaded. Here, Coons is asking her, hey, what are you going to do if Trump comes to you and says, you need to drop that investigation, like he's done numerous times to numerous attorneys general, right? Like, he had multiple attorneys general because they wouldn't do his bidding. Some wouldn't do his bidding. And for Pam Bondi to sit here and just with a straight face, you know, she's not going to say, hey, look, you know, that's a hypothetical. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. No, it's, Donald Trump would never do that. Oh, he's done that with other AGs, but no, not with me. Donald Trump is a good man. Notice the cross hanging around her neck, right? Donald Trump is a Christian. Oh, he would never.
Based on the facts and the law that is applied in good faith. Period. Politics have got to be taken out of the system.
This
department has been weaponized for years and years and years,
but
and it has to stop.
Thank you. Let me, if I might, Madam Attorney General, refer you back to Senator Durbin's opening comments about previous
Coons,
attorneys general,
the Attorney General
our
yet.
former colleague Jeff Sessions,
Attorney General
Bill Barr. I don't think it's credible to say that it may never happen that the president-elect would direct an unethical or illegal act. I think both of those attorneys general found themselves crosswise with the then president by doing things he didn't welcome or approve of. Just answer the question for me, if you would. I know you may not expect it. I know you wouldn't have accepted this nomination if you thought it possible. But let's imagine that once again, President-elect Trump issues a directive or order to you or to the FBI director that is outside the boundaries of ethics or law. What will you do?
Senator, I will never speak on a hypothetical, especially one saying that the president would do.
There it is. There it is, Pam. There it is. So the second time he asked that question, hey, look, like, come on. Exactly what I was just saying. Come on, he's done this before. What are you going to do? Oh, you're asking again? You're really holding my feet to the fire? Well, then I already told you he's not going to do it. And now that you really want to know What I'm going to do, well, it's a hypothetical, so let's move on. I'm not going to go there. Playbook, man. Tired playbook.
Do something illegal. What I can tell you is my duty, if confirmed as the Attorney General, will be to the Constitution and the United States of America. And the most important oath, part of that oath that I will take, are the last 4 words, "So help me God."
Given the importance of that oath, I hope you can understand the importance of repeated questions from some of us about the importance of having independence in the Department of Justice. It has a long tradition of independent special prosecutors, especially to handle high-profile or often political cases. If you got credible evidence of a criminal violation by a White House official, including even the president, would you bring in a special prosecutor?
Senator, that's a hypothetical. I can tell you what I do know is special prosecutors have been abused in the past on both sides. We have seen that for many, many years. They have cost the taxpayers countless dollars, countless. And I will look at each situation on a case-by-case basis and consult the appropriate career ethics officials within the department to make that decision.
Attorney General, do you think special counsels need to be confirmed by the Senate?
I will follow the law and I will consult with the appropriate ethics officials regarding the law. Right now, they do not need to be Senate confirmed, of course.
But you did sign an 11th Circuit brief arguing that they should be.
I will follow the law, Senator. That's why I said that.
Understood, but I was just getting to the clarity about the difference between a
Absolutely.
position you've advocated and what the current law is. Thank you for that. Look, bluntly, to me, refusing to answer a hypothetical when there is clear and concrete previous history raises some concerns for me. I think Chris Wray has done an outstanding job as FBI director at avoiding political pressure, and although he was chosen by President Trump, he's being driven out so that he can be replaced. My perception, I've not yet met with Mr. Patel, by a loyalist who has publicly said he will do what the president asks him. Given that Attorney General Barr was asked to go find evidence of election interference and improprieties, went and looked for the evidence and said, I can't find any, and was then dismissed, I'm just going to ask you one last time. Can you clarify for me that in following ethics and the law, you'd be willing to resign if ordered to do something improper?
Senator, I wouldn't work at a law firm. I wouldn't be a prosecutor. I wouldn't be Attorney General. If anyone asked me to do something improper and I felt I had to carry that out, of course I would not do that. That's one of the main things you learn when you're a young prosecutor is to do the right thing. And I believe that has continued with me throughout my very long career.
As we discussed, protecting American invention and innovation, American intellectual property, is a real concern of mine and of several others on this committee. I look forward to talking with you about that pressing concern. But the most important question I had for you today is whether you will be willing and able to stand up to politicization and interference in the Department of Justice. And I look forward to further clarification from you about the specifics of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator.
Senator Cruz would be next, but he's not here, so I call on Senator Kennedy.
Oh, thank God.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank God we don't have to listen to Cruz. Unfortunately,
Ms. Bondi,
Kennedy
welcome. Congratulations.
is not much better. This
Can
is going
we
to be a
agree
circus.
that legitimacy is important to America's criminal justice system?
Yes, Senator.
Can we agree that legitimacy is important to the Department of Justice, which in part administers our criminal justice system?
Yes, Senator.
And if Americans come to believe that our criminal justice system or our Department of Justice is acting illegitimately, that makes Americans less likely to accept the results of that system, does it not?
Yes, Senator.
And that makes Americans less likely to follow the substantive laws that we pass that are administered by the Department of Justice. Isn't that
Kennedy,
true?
slow
Yes,
down,
Senator.
buddy.
And if that happens, we have chaos, don't we?
Chaos.
And the social contract is breached, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you remember a person by the name of Michael Avenatti?
Yes.
Several years ago, he was a media star here in Washington.
An attorney, correct?
Yes. He was a media star. And many members of our media loved him because he persistently bashed Donald Trump. And he was on TV every day. He was on CNN more than Wolf Blitzer.
Kennedy, man, do you want to describe the context in which Avenatti became a star, quote unquote, if you want to call him that? Because he represented the porn star that Donald Trump tried to intimidate and pay off while running for president the first time. Like, you want to talk about that? The porn star he cheated on his wife with? No.
Do you know where Mr. Avenatti is today?
I believe he's sitting in prison, Senator.
He's in jail because he was a crook. And the Department of Justice helped put him there, didn't it?
Yes, Senator.
Do you remember a gentleman by the name of Sam Bankman-Fried?
Yes, Senator.
Boy genius. So smart and so powerful that he thought he could command the tides. So smart and so powerful and so rich that he would go to meetings with serious people like Bill Clinton, like Tony Blair, looking like a slob, looking like a fourth runner-up to a John Belushi lookalike contest.
Where is this going?
And he thought it was cute. Where's Mr. Bankman-Fried today?
I believe he is in prison, and I believe that's from the Netflix series I saw as well.
Mm-hmm. Because he's a crook. And who helped put him there?
The Department of Justice, Senator.
Can we agree that there's some really, really good men and women at the Department of Justice?
Many, many great men and women in the Justice Department, as well, Senator, as all the law enforcement agencies that fall within the Department of Justice. They're out there risking their lives, especially the law enforcement officers, every single day.
Can we agree, though, that there have been and may be today some bad people at the Department of Justice?
Yes, Senator.
We don't know for sure because for the last 4 years, the curtains there have been tightly drawn. But I think a minority of people there, have delegitimized America's criminal justice system. The most destabilizing act that I saw in the past 4 years, maybe in the history of the department, is when Attorney General Garland decided on the basis of dubious facts and untested legal theories to criminally prosecute a former president of the United States. And not only that, this is the special part. he decided to do it after the former president of the United States had announced that he was going to run against Attorney General Garland's boss, didn't he?
Senator, are you referring to going after a political opponent?
I think so.
Aw, you guys are so
Now-
cute. A political opponent who broke the law. Just because you're a politician doesn't mean you're above the law. Should we talk about that, Kennedy? Very, very slowly, Mr. Kennedy. Jesus, he's going to take like his 7 or 8 minutes, and it's just going to be, he's going to be dancing around these.
This is one person's opinion.
Oh, man. I'm like,
That kind of stupid
I want to
takes a
give these
plan.
senators the time to talk, but like,
And I say that because,
this guy's just such a
number one,
waste
this is
of
America.
space and time.
That had never happened before in America. That's the sort of thing that happens in a country whose Powerball jackpot is 287 chickens and a goat. It doesn't happen here. And I call it stupid because it broke the seal. It broke the seal. It normalized it. There are a lot of ambitious prosecutors in America, Democrat and Republican. And I'll bet you right now there's some prosecutor in a particular state thinking about, well, maybe I ought to file criminal charges against President Biden's inner circle for conspiring to
You don't think that Republican prosecutors have been foaming at the mouth to bring charges against Joe Biden and his inner circle? You clown? That's all you guys have been talking about in these committees for the past 4 years. Biden corruption, Hunter Biden corruption. Oh yeah, by the way, Hunter Biden was prosecuted. Oh, we're not like that. We would never prosecute Joe Biden because of his political affiliation with the Democratic Party, and yet that's all we've talked about. Let's ignore the fact that Joe Biden has not broken the law, right? I mean, come on, Kennedy. Just, ugh.
to conceal his mental decline. And that's the road we're headed down. And you've got to fix it, Counselor. You've got to fix it. And here's, in my judgment, what I would ask you to do. Find out who the bad guys are and the bad women and get rid of them. Find out who the good people are and lift them up. But do it on the basis of facts and evidence and fairness. Because the temptation of some people is going to be, they're going to tell you, look, 2 wrongs don't make a right, but they do make it even. Don't resist that temptation. Help us restore legitimacy to the Department of Justice.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, okay. Next.
Thank you,
Next.
Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Ms. Bondi, and to your family.
Thank you.
Thank you for visiting with me in my office. And I have to say, I'm sympathetic always to a former Attorney General, particularly having been one myself. But I am, I have to say also, really troubled, deeply disturbed by some of your responses and non-responses to the question that you've been asked today. You say the right things, that you're going to be the people's lawyer. That's what you have to say to be here. But I believe being the people's lawyer means you have to be able to say no to the President of the United States. You have to speak truth to power. You have to be able to say that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. You dodged that question when you were asked directly by Senator Durbin. You have to be able to say that January 6th insurrectionists who committed violence shouldn't be pardoned. You have to be able to say that a nominee for the FBI director who says he has an enemy list, and that's just the beginning of what he has said in terms of politicizing, deeply weaponizing the FBI against political opponents, that he shouldn't be the FBI director. You know, we have some history here with your predecessors, Barr, Sessions, and others, who perhaps sincerely, when they sat where you are now, said that they would say no, but they were working with a president that expected them to be his Roy Cohn, his personal attorney. Do you really think that you can avoid the disgrace that they encountered or the repercussions from the White House if you say no to the president? And so my question to you is, can you say no to the President of the United States when he asks you to do something unethical or illegal?
Senator, first, I need to clarify something that you said, that I have to sit up here and say these things. No, I don't. I sit up here and speak the truth. I'm not going to sit up here and say anything that I need to say to get confirmed by this body. I don't have to say anything. I will answer the questions to the best of my ability.
Well,
and
let
honestly,
me ask you, an individual who says that he is going to, quote, come after, end quote, people he alleges, quote, help Joe Biden rig the presidential elections, that he has a list of people who are part of this deep state who should be prosecuted, that he's going to close down the FBI building on his first day in office. Is that a person who appropriately should be the FBI director? Aren't those comments inappropriate? Shouldn't you disavow them and ask him to recant them?
Senator, I am not familiar with all those comments. I have not discussed those comments with Mr. Patel. What I do know
Well,
is
I'm
Mr.
asking
Patel,
you for your view.
Excuse me. What I do know is Mr. Patel was a career prosecutor. He was a career public defender defending people. And he also has great experience within the intelligence community. What I can sit here and tell you is Mr. Patel, if he works with running the FBI, if he is confirmed, and if I am confirmed, he will follow the law if I am the Attorney General of the United States of America, and I don't believe he would do anything otherwise.
Well, let me just submit that.
Huh. Interesting. So she'll resist questions about hypotheticals all day, during these confirmation hearings. But as soon as Kash Patel is brought up, he would never do this. I'll give you a hypothetical. He's going to be an angel. Well, yeah, but he has an enemies list. Oh, I don't know anything about that. I don't know. That's what she's done if you're just tuning in. Whenever Pam Bondi is asked about things that Donald Trump has done or quotes that people have that would put her in a tricky situation, it's, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. But she's so quick to make all these baseless accusations. Oh, the Biden DOJ weaponized our FBI and our justice system against Donald Trump. Oh, okay. Yeah. Where's the evidence of that? Evidence shows that he committed crimes and he's being held accountable. Oh, it's weaponization. Oh, can't talk, can't say that Biden won the election. On and on and on. She just resists Democratic senators. And she's going to get nominated. And we'll see how long she lasts as Attorney General. But yeah, she's doing this for Trump.
The response that I would have hoped to hear from you is that those comments are inappropriate and that you will ask him to disavow or recant them when he comes before this committee. because they are indeed chilling to fair enforcement and the rule of law. Let me ask you on another topic. When we met, I welcomed your support for the goals of the Kids Online Safety Act. And Senator Blackburn and I have spent a lot of time, devoted a lot of effort to the passage of the Kids Online Safety Act, which happened by an overwhelming vote of 91-3, 72 co-sponsors, including Vice President-elect Vance. I appreciated our discussion and your support for protecting kids online when we met last week. I'm hopeful that this area is one where we can work together. Can we count on your support in working together to protect kids online?
Senator, absolutely, and thank you for that legislation, and Senator Blackburn. I believe in this world right now, we have to find the things we have in common, and that is certainly one of them, Senator, protecting our children from online predators. You've done so much on that front, and I thank you. I attempted to do that as well when I was Attorney General, but I am committed to working with you on anything we can do to protect our children throughout this country. When I was Attorney General, we started something called From Instant Message to Instant Nightmare, and educating parents about online predators. And that also, Senator, is one of the core functions of the FBI, the cyber unit. They sit there, these agents sit there all day long and investigate child predators. We tell parents constantly, you think
Ms.
you're talking
Bondi,
to another
I
child,
apologize.
and you're
I'm
not.
going to interrupt you. I welcome
Sure.
your positive response. I have
Oh,
one
go ahead.
more question that I'm going to try to fit into
Sure.
this round. TikTok will be banned unless it is sold because it has become a tool for the Chinese to collect information and do surveillance and endanger our national security. Can you commit that you will enforce that law promptly and effectively? And I ask this question because President Trump's pick for your Solicitor General in the Department of Justice went to the United States Supreme Court arguing that the ban should be delayed. Will you commit to enforce that law on your first day when you are if you are confirmed?
Senator, as I discussed with you during our meeting, that is pending litigation within the Department of Justice.
Well, it's pending litigation, but will you enforce that law?
I can't discuss pending litigation, but I will talk to all the career
Well, again,
prosecutors who are handling the case. Absolutely, Senator. Discuss with them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Tillis.
Ms. Bondi, thank you for being here. I think I told you when we met, thank you for the time we met. I was born in Florida, have a lot of friends and family, and follow Florida politics pretty closely, and you've had a very impressive career there, though I do also have to admit I'm a Gator hater, so for the Florida alum, I'm University of Tennessee. But anyway, I actually, in some of these hearings, I created a bingo card to see what some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were going to hit. I want to go back to a few of them really quickly.
Oh, you created a bingo card. Oh, that's cute, right? That's cute because this is a game. This is a game to you, Senator. Just like the Pete Hegseth committee hearing, they're joking, they're laughing, just completely despicable. These people, these Republican senators they so clearly think that they are just above this. Yeah.
One was about you being a lobbyist paid for and on the payroll of Qatar. Would you mind going back and repeating what you said in case people did not hear the involvement of your law firm and precisely what you were doing for the government of Qatar?
Yes, Senator, I was very proud of that work. It was anti-human trafficking in advance of the World Cup, and human trafficking has been something that's been very important to me my entire career, especially when I was Attorney General of the state of Florida.
And you also made it clear that you had a number of practitioners within the firm working on it, so this narrative that you were getting $115,000 a month from Qatar is correct or not?
Not correct.
Okay, thank you.
It was 105.
I want to talk a little bit about...
It was 150.
Well, first off, I want to go back. You should be happy that so many comments have been directed towards Kash Patel, whose confirmation I am supporting. In fact, I'm meeting with him today, because that means they're out of stuff for you. So if it comes up again, you will once again know that you've got a great reputation and a great resume, and they are just trying to find things to put your integrity into question. You have answered the question.
Yeah, so that's actually okay. So he makes a good point, right? Okay, so they want to talk about Kash Patel here. And so that brings me back to Pete Hegseth. I mean, Pete Hegseth is on my mind because I covered his confirmation hearing yesterday, in which he just, every time that Democrats brought up these accusations against him, sexual assault, being drunk on the job, being drunk at strip clubs and shouting "kill all Muslims," mismanaging funds at his the veteran group that he worked for, which afterwards a forensic auditor had to come in to find out what had happened, how poorly this had been mismanaged, the budget had been mismanaged. And Pete Hegseth's answer every time was those allegations were completely anonymous, completely false and anonymous. And he says that, you know, the left-wing media is just doing this to try to come at me and try to sink my nomination to be the Secretary of Defense, to head the Defense Department. And so if Pete Hegseth's logic here is that the Democrats are willing to just make up all these accusations, well, then why isn't that happening with Pam Bondi? Why isn't the Democratic Party just making up accusations about her, screaming and ranting that she'll forever be Donald Trump's warrior against the weaponization of the Democratic Party, or you know, any or making up stories about her being drunk on the job. It's just not there. And so that I'm not saying that Pam Bondi is some sort of angel here. They're all terrible people. But you know, Pete Hegseth, I think his nomination could potentially really sink here, because he is so desperate to paint these Democrats as the ones who are creating all these false allegations, when it's very clear that the guy is a drunk Christian nationalist.
That you're that you will be loyal to the Constitution, and you will live up to the oath to the Constitution and to protecting the American people. And I think Mr. Patel, when he becomes here, he'll be able to get rid of the myth in the same way that you did as a lobbyist for Qatar. He'll be able to get rid of that list of the enemies, be able to deal with the enemies list, and the marketing department for your opposition is going to have to come up with new material, because that stuff is getting old. Section 702, you heard Senator Lee talk about some concerns that he has with 702. I believe it's one of the most important things that you can do early into your confirmation. You will be confirmed, and hopefully with some Democrat support. That there have been dramatic reforms to 702. I've sat through an extensive presentation to try and make sure that the abuses never occur again, and that you have a throat to choke if somebody abuses the protocol that's in place. I believe that we need to codify a lot of that. As a matter of fact, when I went through it, I felt like there were so many blinding flashes of the obvious. How could this not have already been a part of the approval matrix? So can you, after you're confirmed, commit that you or a designate will come back and provide for this committee an update on all of the protocols that have changed, and recommended legislation for codifying, so that when we do go to reauthorization, we'll have what we need to make sure that that program stays in place?
Senator, I or a designee will review all of 702 before it terms, of course, in 2026, and come back and report to you on both sides of the aisle.
Thank you. You have a great perspective with your time in the state and working with the Department of Justice. Give me an idea of things that we need to do better in terms of, and I'm talking primarily in the law enforcement role. I think many people don't understand the joint task forces, the law enforcement efforts that are going every single day in every one of our states. What an incredible job.
The border.
I'm just not. I just don't care.
Lunch break, and that break will be for 30 minutes. And I can't control when my senators come back, but I expect you to be back after 30 minutes, and I'll be here.
Yes, Chairman.
And then I may leave the meeting to open the Senate.
Okay.
A meeting to open the Senate, so whoever's on our side is acting chairman during that period of time. Senator Hirano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As part of my responsibility to ensure the fitness of all nominees, I ask the following two initial questions. First, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
Ms. Bondi, I am focused on two things in my evaluation of President-elect Trump's nominees. The first is whether the nominee is qualified and experienced enough to do the job. The second is a fitness to serve, which includes putting loyalty to the Constitution over loyalty to the president. Unfortunately, in my view, many of President-elect Trump's nominees are lacking in at least one of these two requirements. Ms. Bondi, your experience as a prosecutor is the kind of thing we would expect to see in a nominee for Attorney General, but I do have questions and concerns about potential conflicts of interest, about whether you will keep DOJ's law enforcement responsibilities independent of the president's political whims, and about whether you will let facts and evidence guide your decisions. So let's start with the importance of facts, which you say is important. Ms. Bondi, we want an Attorney General who bases decisions on facts. So I want to ask you a factual question. Who won the 2020 presidential election?
Joe Biden is the President of the United States.
Ms. Bondi, you know that there is a difference between acknowledging it and, I can say that Donald Trump won the 2024 election. I may not like it, but I can say it. You cannot say who won the 2020 presidential election. Okay. It's disturbing that you can't give voice to that fact. Moving on to DOJ's independence from politics. Ms. Bondi, if you are confirmed as Attorney General, you will take an oath to the Constitution and not to any individual, including the President. To start, I'd like to know whether you agree with some of the statements President-elect Trump made during the election, during the campaign. First, are the felons convicted of breaking into the Capitol on January 6th hostages or patriots, quoting Trump, as President-elect Trump has said repeatedly? Do you agree with his characterization of the felons that I referred to?
I am not familiar with that statement, Senator.
I just familiarized you with that statement. Do you agree with that statement?
I'm not familiar with it, Senator.
Okay, no answer. He has also said illegal immigration is poisoning the blood of our nation. He said that in December 2023. Do you agree with that statement?
Senator, I am not familiar with that statement, but what I can tell you is I went to the border a few months ago. I went to Yuma, Arizona, and what I saw at that border was horrific, Senator. It was horrific.
Ms. Bondi,
I went to a rape crisis center.
That is
If I could
not my
finish,
question.
I went to a rape crisis center. Well, I'm not familiar with the statement, but I
get
went to a
to
rape
the
crisis
next-
center.
Let
I
me
met
get to
with
the
Border
important-
Patrol
I have?
agents. I'm sure you've been to the
Ms.
border
Bondi,
as well, so
I
you
want to
could
get
answer
to my
that.
next question. So,
Hirono is so over it.
I believe that you responded to a question from Senator Whitehouse, and let me get your response again. You said that the White House, if I'm putting words in your mouth, correct me. You said that the White House will play no role in investigative or charging decisions in the DOJ. Is that correct?
Senator, what I said is that it is the Department of Justice's decision to determine what cases will be prosecuted.
What role will the White House have in investigative or prosecutorial decisions of the DOJ?
It is the Department of Justice's decision, Senator.
So that sounds to me that you're saying that the White House will not have any kind of role. Meanwhile, though, you have an incoming president who said, I have the absolute right to do what I want to do with the Justice Department. And in fact, President-elect Trump considers the DOJ to be his law firm.
Hold on, I'm going to just guess. I'm going to guess what Pam Bondi's response to that quote is, and that she's unfamiliar with it.
I ask you this. If President-elect Trump asks, suggests, or hints that you as Attorney General should investigate one of his proceedings, would you do so?
Had you met with
What is happening with the stream here? Oh, let's see. See if we can go back just a little bit. It's hard when we're a little behind. Oh boy. Here, let's see if we can get this straightened
I'd
out.
like to know whether if the president suggests, hints, asks that you as Attorney General should investigate one of his perceived enemies?
Senator, I
do?
certainly have not heard the president say that, but what I will tell you
She's
is
unfamiliar.
2/3 of Americans have lost faith in the Department of Justice. And it's statements like that, I believe,
Ms.
that make
Bondi.
people continue to lose faith. If I am confirmed as Attorney General, it will be my job
Getting
to
on
not
to my
only
next
keep
question,
America
you're not
safe,
responding.
but restore integrity to that department.
Why don't we
and that's
move
what
on
I
to
plan
something
on
that
doing
you said.
every single day as Attorney General.
On August 25th, 2025, on Fox News, you said, when Republicans prosecutors will be prosecuted, once the investigators will be investigated. Ms. Bondi, is Jack Smith one of those bad prosecutors that you will prosecute as AG?
Senator, you hesitated a bit when I said the bad ones. Every decision
Sometimes
will be
badness
made
in the eyes of the beholder. I'm just asking whether you would consider Jack Smith
Senator,
to be one of the people. How about Liz Cheney?
Senator,
How about Merrick Garland?
I am not going to medicals. No one has been prejudged, nor will
I
anyone
am
be
asking
prejudged
whether
if I am
these are
confirmed.
the kind of people, these are in fact the people that you would prosecute. I'm not
Your
getting an answer.
time is up. Would you like to?
My time is,
Would you like to
Mr.
respond?
Chairman, she is clearly not going to answer that question, so let me get on to,
Would you like to?
I do have
I'd love to
questions for the second round.
You'll have a second round. Would you like to speak before I call on Senator Cruz?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bondi, welcome. Thank you for
Thank you.
your long career in public service, and thank you for your willingness to take on this incredibly important office. You know, I have to say, I don't know that there is a more important position in this new administration than the position to which you have been nominated, Attorney General of the United States. I thought the exchange just a moment ago with Senator Hirono was illustrative. She asked you how you would respond if the president asked you to target his political enemies. It's rather striking because it's not a hypothetical. It is for years. And I think perhaps the most tragic legacy of the Biden-Harris administration has been the politicization and the weaponization of the United States Department of Justice.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's cool that you say that, but we all know that you are a lying sleaze. So, you know, there's also that. Either Joe Biden is the worst president, you know, everybody's corrupt, they're all coming after Trump, or, and just hear me out, MAGA, they're lying to you. They're lying to you to cover up for the felon the serial sexual abuser, assaulter, the corporate fraud. It could be that Joe Biden is just, he decided to break bad when he got into the presidency, right? After decades of service to our nation. It could be that. Or Republicans like Ted Cruz and Donald Trump are full of shit.
And we don't need to ask hypothetically because Joe Biden publicly mused and allowed the New York Times to report it, calling on Merrick Garland, why will he not prosecute Trump more quickly? And Merrick Garland, sadly, he sat in that chair and promised to be apolitical, and he broke that promise almost the instant he walked.
Now hold on here, Ted. If what you say is true, which, I highly doubt it is, calling on a prosecutor to work efficiently and bring justice against someone efficiently is a lot different, right? Is a lot different than saying, no, you need to go after them, right? Once an investigation and prosecution has started, it is very different for a president to go, hey, man, I just want this to be run efficiently and not quickly, but just efficiently, which is, I'm assuming that's what Biden said, but I'm also assuming that Biden didn't say anything like that because Biden isn't an idiot and has gone out of his way, gone above and beyond to make it clear that he is not going to affect the Justice Department, their prosecutions. But no. Cruz is going to stand here and tell you that night is day, up is down, left is right. Because that's who Ted Cruz is.
Walked into the Department of Justice. If you look on the west pediment of the Supreme Court of the United States, just above the entrance, there's a simple yet profound four-word phrase, equal justice under law. We have seen over the last 4 years a Department of Justice that systematically targeted the political opponents of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and that systematically protected his friends and allies. And it is tragic to see the loss of confidence in the American people, in the Department of Justice, and in the FBI. I would note, I don't think there's an institution in America who has lost more respect from the American people than the FBI has in the last 4 years. That is a grotesque violation of the obligation of the Department of Justice and the FBI. So I want to start with just a very simple question. If you are confirmed as Attorney General, will you pledge to fairly and faithfully uphold the law regardless of party?
So help me God.
Amen. Look, and I want to be clear.
You guys are weird.
I don't want a Republican Department of Justice. I don't want a Democrat Department of Justice. I want a Department of Justice that follows the damn law. And I think the American people do too. That shouldn't be too much to expect. Now, I'm grateful to President Trump for nominating you. I think on any objective level, you're clearly qualified for this position. You have been a prosecutor for decades. You have been the elected Attorney General of the state of Florida, the third largest state in America, for 8 years. Let me ask you, in terms of your practice, how many criminal cases over the course of your career have you personally handled?
Handled thousands.
How many of those were before a jury?
Hundreds. I don't want to overstate, but hundreds. I was in a courtroom for many years. I tried 4 when I was an intern, jury trials. I think you had to try at least 20 in misdemeanor before you went to felony. Then you were in court every day, and I was also lead trial attorney for many years trying many cases, so.
And how many of those cases would have been before a judge?
Okay, I'm going to skip past Ted Cruz. Okay, we go to a break here, and then I think they might be back. So I'm going to take this thing live.
Understanding the moment that you're in.
Here we go. Now we're
and the
caught up.
landscape. We've never seen anything like this. And there is a story to be told. The arc of this story.
I wonder if they misspelled anything on the back of this guy's board, like they did yesterday in Hegseth's nomination, where they misspelled military.
Calling them threats to the Republic, threats to democracy, these MAGA Republicans, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure President Trump ever gets back into the White House. Miraculously, these zombie cases are resurrected. And let's talk about a couple of those. You've got, of course, Jack Smith, the overzealous and disgraced special prosecutor who time and time again has been slapped down by courts for overcharging and taking an overtly political position. He, by the way, in his postmortem this week, even acknowledged that it was unusual for him to be tasked with going after the political opponent of the President of the United States. It didn't stop him, though. The Supreme Court did, thankfully. But you had Jack Smith take on these unprecedented actions. You had a raid at Mar-a-Lago, staged photos at Mar-a-Lago for boxes of documents, which, by the way, boxes of documents were in Joe Biden's garage from his Senate days. And by the way, somebody who didn't register like you did under FARA, Hunter Biden was staying in. We don't know if he's compromised or not because that investigation was dropped. And give me a break that justice was meted out fairly for Hunter Biden. It wasn't. The Department of Justice went out of its way in documents to try to get him absolved of all potential crimes in the plea deal. It was only when the judge asked questions that unwound that. And they got back to the gun charge, but then President Biden did the dirty work himself. It was always going to be Plan B. You had Jonathan Sue, Biden's deputy White House counsel, coordinated with the DOJ and Jay Bratt on those classified document cases. Matthew Colangelo, who's that? The number 3 guy at DOJ goes to where? Alvin Bragg's office. Alvin Bragg then resurrects a zombie case in lawfare at a local level. Why would the number 3 person go do that? Maybe there was coordination. Maybe there was coordination, by the way, with the number 2 assistant DA in Atlanta in the Fani Willis case, who was meeting with the White House. Why would the White House care about a case in Atlanta? Well, the truth is everybody knows it was on full display. This was the worst case of lawfare we've ever seen. If this was happening in another country, our State Department will be warning us about it. It's the banana republic stuff. And one of the reasons why I'm so glad that you have been put up and nominated for this position is that I think you have the ability to level set. So when the Democrats ask you questions about your independence, it is beyond ironic that we're sitting here today because of the lack of independence from Merrick Garland and Eric Holder bragging about being Obama's wingman. So I just want to ask you, you've been asked this a bunch of times, you're going to make decisions, as you always have, right, on the law and let investigations go where they're going to go, but they're not politically motivated, correct?
Yes, Senator, based on the law and the facts that apply.
And in my limited time, I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about some of your experience working with law enforcement as Florida's Attorney General. This is something that, you know, as you and I talked about over the years, you were known for this, the collaboration you had. And I think getting the Department of Justice back to its core function of taking on violent crime, protecting the constitutional rights of Americans, but taking on violent crime is really important. And how you went about doing it, you've gotten bipartisan praise for that over the years. You've got the support of all these law enforcement agencies. That's something that you're going to continue and take forward into this office. Is that right?
Yes, Senator. Thank you so much. And I feel like my experience with that goes back to when I was a state prosecutor with state and local, our sheriffs, our police departments, our police chiefs, and then as Attorney General on a statewide basis. And now, if I'm confirmed, all of our federal law enforcement agencies, I would be very proud to supervise those.
I'll just close with this, Mr. Chairman. We heard one of my Democrat colleagues ask you the question that you're not going to pursue a case because of a name, but because of the crime. I would argue that the current Department of Justice adopted Lenin's claim, which was, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. And they did everything they could to throw President Trump in jail for the rest of his life because they didn't want to lose the ballot box. That is not what this country's about. That is not what this republic is about. But they did it. And it's up to you now to restore the integrity, and I have of that agency, of the Department of Justice, and I have full confidence that you will.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I begin, I just want to remind us all for the record that the 34 convictions, not indictments, convictions of former President, incoming President Trump were by a jury of his peers. Thank you, Ms. Bondi, for being here today, and I too would like to welcome your family and friends who are here.
Thank you.
Appreciated the opportunity to meet yesterday to learn about your priorities and discuss a number of issues that are important to me. But I got to tell you, as I reflected on our conversation yesterday and as I've observed the hearing today, I continue to have significant reservations on your ability to function as a truly independent Attorney General for your friend. Let's say you keep referring to him, your friend, President-elect Trump. So I hope you can address some of these concerns through your responses to my questions here. Now, the first issue area is something that we didn't get a chance to touch on yesterday. So I actually want to follow up on some of Senator Durbin's questions from earlier about the 2020 election. And to be specific, on the day after the 2020 presidential general election, you traveled to Philadelphia to appear alongside President Trump's then attorney, Rudy Giuliani. And together, you falsely asserted that President Trump had, quote, won Pennsylvania in that election. Now, I want to be clear, at that moment, there were still at least 1 million ballots left to be counted in Pennsylvania. Of course, President Biden went on to win the state by more than 80,000 votes. But in the following days, even after the results were clear, you continued to double down on the big lie, promoting falsehoods about election fraud and cheating without offering any actual evidence. And I remember it clearly because I served as California Secretary of State at the time, and I invited anybody associated with the Trump campaign who was making these claims to come forward with evidence of irregularities in the election or massive voter fraud. 4 years later, I still have seen none. So I ask you today, do you have any evidence of election fraud or irregularities in the 2020 election?
So, First Senator.
Yes or no? It's a yes or no question.
First Senator.
Do you have evidence, yes or no?
First Senator. I'm so sorry about the fires to you and Senator Schiff and what you're going through in your states. I have to say that.
I
And
appreciate
think
that,
all
but
of
my
our
clock is
I'll
ticking
answer
and I
your
want to
question.
hear
All of our
your answer.
hearts go out to everyone in California for what you're facing right now. I'm glad you asked the question about Pennsylvania.
It's a yes or no question.
I was
Do
hoping
you have
someone
evidence, yes or
would.
no?
Senator, I was hoping you'd ask the question.
Do you have evidence, yes or no?
I traveled to Pennsylvania.
Do you have the evidence, yes
I traveled,
or no?
Senator, to Pennsylvania.
Okay, you're not answering my question. If you have no evidence to offer, let me ask you this. Will you now retract your previous statements that Trump won Pennsylvania in the 2020 election, yes or no?
Oh, Senator, I traveled to Pennsylvania, and let me tell you what I saw firsthand.
Yes or
no? I didn't talk about California because I was not in California. I talked about...
Yes or no? Last time I'm going to ask.
I talked about Pennsylvania because
Mr.
I
Chair,
was there.
I'm going to move on because she's
got a
clearly not
court
answering my
order
questions.
to
And I want to know,
observe.
colleagues, for everybody, members of the committee and everybody watching, that the attorney who stood beside Mr. Giuliani was making very similar statements. And he has since been disbarred from multiple jurisdictions for making these false claims about the 2020 election in court. And like Mr. Giuliani, as you've noted today, you've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution just as an attorney. And now You're asking us to consider you to serve as the chief law enforcement officer in our country? So it's imperative, Ms. Bondi, that you subscribe to facts and evidence and not politically convenient conspiracy theories. Your job will be, your job will be to protect voters and election workers, not to undermine and dox them. Now, I know that earlier you agreed that Joe Biden is in fact president, but many of the president-elect's inner circle continue to spread the big lie about the 2020 election. Then we'll move on to a different topic.
Senator, you were speaking.
Padilla here, making Californians incredibly proud by holding Bondi's feet to the fire. No pun there, but saying, look, Giuliani was spreading the same lies you're spreading, and he was disbarred, and now you want us to confirm you to be our nation's top lawyer? This is where it doesn't register with these people. I'm really hoping that because it's very clear that Bondi's going to do Trump's bidding, and I'm hoping that once Trump is out of office, once this all kind of settles, and the Justice Department can kind of get back to investigating these crooks, that they'll hold these people accountable.
May I speak? You cut
when
me
I ask
off
you the
when
next
I was
question,
speaking.
you can speak, and I hope you answer, Ms. Bondi.
Well, I'd
now,
like
when
to
we met
answer
yesterday,
the previous one, Senator.
When we met yesterday,
You pointed your finger at me and
you
said
did not
you were
seem
speaking.
to be familiar
Let me answer
with
my question. I'm not going to be
Citizenship
bullied by you,
Clause,
Senator
the 14th
Padilla.
Amendment of the United States of America, which was deeply disappointing.
I guess you
And I'm
didn't want to
hoping
hear
you're more
my
familiar
answer
with it
about
today
Pennsylvania.
after I gave an opportunity to study overnight. So can you tell me and this committee what the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment says?
Senator, I'm here to answer your questions. I'm not here to do your homework and study for you. If I am confirmed as
you're
Attorney
the one
General,
asking for a confirmation
hey,
vote,
you
ma'am.
cut me off. Can I please finish?
What does the 14th Amendment say?
Senator, the 14th Amendment, we all know, addresses birthright citizenship. I've been a state prosecutor. I've been a state AG. I look forward to, even given your remarks today, working with you and the people of California if I am confirmed as the 87th Attorney General of the United States of America. I didn't take your homework assignment. I'm sorry. I was preparing for today.
So on the 14th Amendment, now you've testified repeatedly to this committee that you will uphold the laws of this country and defend the Constitution of the United States. Do you believe birthright citizenship is the law of the land, and will you defend it regardless of a child born in the United States, regardless of their parents' immigration status?
Senator, I will study birthright citizenship. I would love to meet with you regarding birthright
you're asking us
citizenship.
to
Can I
consider
answer
to
the
serve as the
question?
Attorney General of the United States, and you still need to study the 14th Amendment of the Constitution? That is not helping me have more confidence in your ability to do this job. One other immigration-related question, and I'll steer clear of the Constitution
I have one
and the
regarding
law.
that I'd like
Senator
to talk about.
Hirona asked you earlier, but I don't think you answered her question. Can you please tell us, do you agree with the statement that immigrants are, quote, poisoning the blood of our country, yes or no?
I did not say that.
I did not say that you said that. I'm asking if you agree with it, yes or no.
I did not say that.
Do you agree with it, yes
Senator,
or no?
my great-grandparents are immigrants.
Do you agree with it,
They
yes or no?
came here from Sicily
Do you agree
through
with it,
Ellis
yes or
Island
no?
when they were teenagers.
Do you agree with it, yes or no?
Senator, let me answer the question.
Yes or no? It's
My
real simple.
great-grandparents came here, immigrated to this country from Sicily, recently went and found each of their birth certificates. We are a nation made up of immigrants. Do I believe immigrants are poisoning our country? No, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I can't wait for the second round.
She did it. She did it, everybody. She answered a Democratic senator's question straight up. Oh, Pam Bondi. Oh, confirm her right away. My goodness. After dozens of attempts, Padilla finally gets an answer from her. If you're watching this as, say, like a clip, independently, if you haven't been watching this stream, if you haven't been watching this hearing, she has resisted Democratic questions throughout this hearing. questions on the election, questions on statements that Donald Trump has made, or the incoming FBI director. I don't know why I'm blanking on that guy's name. Kash Patel, statements he has made about his what he wants to do with the FBI, or the enemies list that he has. And it's always, oh, I'm not familiar with those statements. I'm not familiar with that. Just like she said here. She's not familiar with Donald Trump saying that immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, even though it was covered for months, because he said it for months, used Adolf Hitler's remarks for months during this campaign. But when it comes to her confirmation hearing about basically, essentially, she's not supposed to be Donald Trump's lawyer or attorney general, but that's what she's going to be. It's all of a sudden I have no idea. And so Democrats have been, pulling and trying to get her to answer their questions, to give us just like, and this is very basic shit. Like, hey, we probably shouldn't be talking and using the same talking points as Adolf Hitler, right? Oh, well, I'm not familiar with those statements. And so if you think that Padilla was being combative here, it's because Bondi has for hours been sitting here and resisting Democrats on very basic things. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? Did President Biden win the election? She can't say it, right? Just like she doesn't know about these statements about immigrants poisoning the blood. So she finally gives an answer. And it should have come hours ago when she was asked about this. But she resisted, and that is why Padilla has been so kind of combative with her. And then let's just really quickly, before we get back into this hearing, she is essentially, she doesn't hold any power in these hearings. All of the power is with the senators. They control this time. You don't get to speak over them. They will just speak because you are there to convince them to confirm you for a position. These senators are the ones with the power here. So Pam Bondi talking about how Padilla's pointing his finger and talking over her. Yeah, that's because you're she's not really a witness, but she's not kind of adhering to the procedures of the Senate. If they don't like the way you're answering a question because you're not answering a question, they can just move on. They don't have to give you time to answer a question. They control the time. Padilla here making me, as a Californian, very, very proud.
Same, Senator. Thank you. No, sir. Thank you.
Suggestions about unfair statements about the 2020 election. I thought I'd remind people that Senator Schumer and former Senator Casey raised questions about the Pennsylvania Senate race just a few months ago. In 2018, numerous Senate Democrats, some of them on this committee, claimed that the Georgia governor's election was stolen. In 2016, Hillary Clinton and a host of Democrats claimed the election was stolen or illegitimate and blamed Russia for the loss. And every one of my Democrat colleagues voted last month to confirm Judge Anthony Brzezinski. He engaged in lengthy litigation regarding his loss of the 2020 congressional election and did not concede until 3 months after the election. I think we all agree that our elections can be more secure and better run, but I find these lines of attack against the nominee very partisan.
Oh, you find this very partisan, Chairman Grassley? Did any of those instances result in thousands of people trying to storm the Capitol to kill you guys and your House of Representative colleagues? Did any of that happen, Chairman Grassley? But yeah, those Democrats, they complain about elections when y'all scheme and plot and cheat and steal every step of the way with your redistricting and your campaign finance violations. Oh, give me a break, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you so much for being here today, and really glad to see your family. I had the opportunity to help them find where to come back in.
Thank you, Senator.
They are all so excited, and rightfully so, and so proud of who you are and the work that you've done. And speaking of, I think it is absolutely, completely ridiculous that anyone on the other side of the aisle would ever say that you are anything but immensely qualified for this job. From your time as a career prosecutor to then a two-time attorney general.
Katie Britt's got she's got her voice going. Oh boy.
Immensely qualified. Let me get really, really in this with you. Okay. Let's get to the bottom of this.
Largest state with regards to all of the people that operated underneath you, with what you were able to achieve. It is truly remarkable. The United States of America could only be so fortunate if you were confirmed and to have someone of your caliber, of your intellect, and of your experience running a department that unfortunately has been run into the ground. So I think that is full-on gaslighting, which, by the way, I had to get my children to explain to me what that was. Not only that, but to act like you would be the one that...
You're a sitting senator and you don't know what gaslighting is? You do it every day, Britt, and you don't know what gaslighting is? Are you gaslighting us?
That would weaponize the Department of Justice. What I have heard you say time and time and time again is that you will follow the law. And this is coming from a side of the aisle that has allowed the Biden administration, by saying nothing, they've allowed them to go after parents who are at school board meetings, who want nothing more than their children to be taught and not indoctrinated. They have allowed them to go after people who are trying to practice their faith. And they have sat idly by while the weaponization of the Department of Justice has undermined the credibility and credence that Americans believe that they should have in equal justice under the law. So I know that you will, as you have said here, you will follow the law and you will return this department to where it should be in the eyes of Americans. So thank you. And I wish the gaslighting on the other side of the aisle would stop, because from my perspective, I'm over it. And I believe that's exactly what the American people have said too. And speaking of, my distinguished colleague, who I have a great deal of respect from on the other side of the aisle, just said, tried to make you answer a question about immigrants and, quote, poisoning the blood of America. When actually the previous question by our colleague from Hawaii was illegal immigration. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. And the lawlessness under the Biden-Harris administration has made every single state in this nation a border state. I am so thrilled about what you've done when it comes to opioid use and human trafficking, and I look forward to you instituting that at the Department of Justice. Your credentials speak for themselves. When opioid and fentanyl overdoses are the leading cause of death between the ages of 18 and 45 in this nation, we need someone who takes it serious. You not only take that serious, you have a track record of proving to the American people you've done it for the people of Florida, and I look forward to what that means to the families that I have met. You talked about the families you met across Florida that showed you pictures of their loved ones that they lost, their brother, their sister, their cousin, their friend, their mother. And I know that there will be more lives that are saved as a result of your service when you are confirmed. So on that, I say thank you. And when it comes to illegal immigration, which we need to put a stop to, I want to ask you a question that you and I had an opportunity to discuss a little bit. You share my desire, I know, to not only get away from the weaponization and wokeness that we are seeing in the department right now, but really prioritizing safety and security. And I want to say thank you for that commitment and your commitment to blind justice. When we are looking at illegal immigration, the Executive Office of Immigration Review within DOJ, there have been a number of things that we have talked about with that, and I know, as you are aware, some people call it EOIR, some people call it EOR, but it houses our nation's immigration courts. Over the course of the Biden administration, the immigration court backlog has grown from 1.4 million at the end of 2021 to 3.5 million at the end of 2024. Over that same period, the Biden administration pursued policies both at DOJ and DHS to foster a culture within EOR of failure to adjudicate cases. As an example, between FY25 and FY24, immigration judges failed to adjudicate over 340,000 asylum claims. That is compared to just under 13,000 non-adjudicated asylum claims in the previous 6 fiscal years combined. Between cases dismissed, terminations, administrative closures, and failures to adjudicate, EOR during the Biden administration has allowed around 1 million illegal aliens to remain in the United States on an indefinite basis. Now, I've heard Laken Riley brought up multiple times today. Having talked to her parents, no parent should have to go through the heartbreak and tragedy that they have. And we are working diligently to rectify that and ensure that we are keeping Americans safe and secure. But a House Judiciary Committee report on this issue appropriately called it, quote, quiet amnesty, what we're talking here with EOR. Will you commit to me that if confirmed, you will make it a priority to reform the way that EOR operates and put in place measures to ensure that immigration judges actually adjudicate these claims and cases?
Yes, Senator, thank you for meeting with me in advance. And I learned so much from you about this topic. And I look forward to learning more and working with you to do everything we can to make sure that functions properly.
Thank you.
If I am confirmed, Senator.
Thank you. Well, you are going to be confirmed because America needs you. As a part of this effort, I hope that you will consider a number of things, including reinstating the performance metrics for immigration judges, similar to that were in place during the first Trump administration, and a reevaluation of the Biden administration's decisions and policies that have encouraged the use of administrative closures. And I assume I have your commitment to examine those issues thoroughly.
We'll closely examine those, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Booker.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the time. Ms. Bondi, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
And thank you for being willing to meet with me in my office. I really value that time that we had together. If there's anything that's been demonstrated in this hearing thus far, is there is a serious crisis of faith in our judicial system in America. And we are at a time where, as Judge Learned Hand reminded us in his writings and speeches, that the power of the Constitution is only strong as long as it is believed in and had faith by the American people. And that faith is shaken by so much of the political tumult. And as we have a new administration coming in and a lot of the protestations about retribution or going after political opponents, I know you could expand your empathy enough to understand why there are many that really worry about your independence. But I've heard you over and over again in this hearing, as much as I've tried to focus on it as I've gone back and forth between Senate Foreign Relations and another Floridian, Marco Rubio. But I am hearing from you that you understand that the Attorney General's guiding star is the U.S. Constitution and her client is the American people, that there can be no argument about that.
Yes, Senator.
Yes. And more than that, though, I hope that you, should you be confirmed, understand that there is an urgency in not just demonstrating through your actions that independence, but beginning to heal this country's lack of faith and shaken faith in that independence, in the U.S. Constitution. History may not long remember what any of us individually do here, but for the sake of our democracy, what you do to restore and repair the American faith, whether they be Democrats, Independents, or Republicans, is vital. I want to switch here to say publicly that when Donald Trump appointed Craig Carpenito as the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, it was over the objections of myself and then Senator Menendez. I was wrong in my anticipation that he would not do good things in our state. He partnered with local leaders like those in Newark, New Jersey, to dramatically drive down crime. He was good for the safety of the city in which I live and the one that I led. Part of his strategy was to focus his resources on the most violent criminals. But that also meant that he used something that you know of called prosecutorial discretion. His strategies aligned with that of local leaders and was able to create historic drops in our murder rate. You know, through your experience, and you're intimately familiar, that enforcement decisions prosecutors must make every day, which charge to bring, which plea deal to offer, or what sentencing recommendation it makes, it's very important that local prosecutors understand that. Given this enormous discretion our legal system gives them, that they are best determined to make decisions about public safety. I'm very concerned that many people are starting to call for a time in our country where the Department of Justice should prosecute state and local prosecutors who exercise that prosecutorial discretion. As Attorney General, will you commit to respecting the autonomy of state and local prosecutors?
Senator, we have to work together with state and local prosecutors. That's what I did my entire career. And if confirmed as Attorney General, I will continue to do that. They serve a vital function in our justice system.
And you understand, like in my state, that sometimes they will decide not to go after certain low-level offenses in order to use their scarce resources to focus on the strategy of pursuing more dangerous people.
Yes, Senator, I completely understand that.
And those decisions shouldn't be politicized if they're part of a larger public safety strategy.
No, Senator. When I was a state prosecutor, we used to sit down with the U.S. attorneys and talk about cases and work together. And that's what I'm discussing about bringing back the cooperation between state and local
Thank you, Ms.
governments.
Bondi. I just want to continue. One of the most stunning hypocrisies I've found since I've been down here in Washington is every politician gives lip service to driving down gun violence. But the very federal authority, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm, that is primarily focused on enforcing America's gun laws and keeping people safe, is hamstrung by federal leaders. The ATF's core responsibility is assisting in local law enforcement. When I was a mayor, I detailed local law enforcement to the ATF, but I'm stunned at how they have been stripped of resources, of their budget, and all of their capabilities to go after illegal gun running. When I was mayor of the city of Newark, we couldn't find one gun crime that was done with a legally purchased gun. But when I turned to the ATF leader at that time told me in private, we don't have the resources, support, or legal ability to go after these crimes. I am concerned about our ability to fight gun crime in America that threatens our law enforcement officers as well as people in communities from red counties to blue cities. Will you commit to doing everything you can to making sure the ATF has its resources and the legal power to pursue illegal gun runners in our country?
Senator, I will do everything in my power to prevent illegal gun runners in our country. When I left being a state prosecutor to run for Attorney General, I almost didn't run because I was working on a wire case involving illegal gun runners.
The DOJ issued in 2022 a use of force policy for its federal law enforcement officers. It was approved by the heads of the DEA, FBI, U.S. Marshals, and ATF, and many of them said it is actually a use of force policy that actually protects law enforcement officers as well as protects others from having their
having their rights violated. It was also endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police and NAPO, the National Association of Police Organizations. This policy is considered best practices in law enforcement. Will you commit to continuing this policy?
Senator, I have not read the policy. I will review the policy, and I will report back directly to you if I am confirmed as Attorney General, and consult with law enforcement, absolutely.
And I would appreciate if you looked at the policy and I submit questions for the record, hoping that you can elucidate maybe more of your thoughts on this.
Certainly.
And then I will also say, as my last question, because I see my time has run out and I look forward to a second round, the DOJ issued a policy regarding chokeholds, which limited the use of no-knock warrants and chokeholds. It's worth noting that Florida has outlawed no-knock entries altogether since 1994. Would you commit to continuing the 2021 DOJ policy on these issues?
I am familiar with the policy. I have not read it. I'm committed to reading it and studying it and reporting back to you on that policy once again.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, welcome. Congratulations on your nomination. I'm so glad that you've been nominated, as we discussed when we had the chance to meet.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to work with you as a state attorney general for a number of years, and I'm delighted to see you here today before the committee. I look forward to your confirmation. You will be confirmed. I, too, have taken note of the number of times you have been asked about weaponization of the Department of Justice as if it was a theoretical possibility that might happen in the future. One of my colleagues on the other side said, weaponization may well occur under your tenure. We all know that weaponization has occurred like we've never seen before in American history under this administration. And I want to get even more specific. In the last 4 years, this administration has carried out an unprecedented attack and campaign against people of faith. If you look at the numbers, we've never seen anything like it before in American history. It has been one of the most disgraceful chapters in the history of the Justice Department and in the history of the FBI. And I hope that you will reverse this.
Okay, Josh, give us some evidence, bud. Give us some evidence that this is all happening instead of you just pulling at the emotional heartstrings of your completely ignorant and uninformed voters.
And do right by every American citizen, including especially people of faith. Let me give you some specifics. After the Dobbs case was decided by the Supreme Court, over 100 pregnancy care centers and over 300 churches in this country were attacked, vandalized, firebombed. Do you happen to know off the top of your head how many prosecutions Merrick Garland's Justice Department brought in those cases?
I do not, Senator.
It's a stunning number. It's 2. Hundreds of churches, hundreds of pregnancy care centers. And I might just add, these pregnancy care centers, the attacks on them, which were violent, which were gruesome, were egged on and encouraged by rhetoric from members of Congress, including members of this body, who have said that pregnancy care centers aren't real medicine, that they're not real doctors. They have legitimized these attacks. And the same thing was true of churches. And this Justice Department couldn't lift a finger to defend these Americans. But at the same time, they used legislation, a law known as the FACE Act, to prosecute at least 53 different pro-life demonstrators, including people like Mark Houck from Pennsylvania, to whom this Justice Department sent a SWAT team to his door in the early morning hours. He has, I think, 7 children. In the early morning hours, an FBI SWAT team shows up at his door to take him into custody and prosecute him. By the way, he was acquitted. This kind of outrageous, disparate treatment has to end. So here's my question to you. Will you protect churches and pregnancy care centers when they are targeted for violence, when they are targeted for intimidation, when their members or parishioners are threatened with violence or other acts of illegal behavior?
Yes, Senator.
Will you stop the disparate treatment of Americans on the basis of religious faith?
Yes, Senator.
Will you stop the deliberate persecution of pro-life Americans for nothing more than their pro-life beliefs?
Yes, Senator.
Will you ensure that nothing like the Mark Houck case happens again, that Americans do not have SWAT teams arriving on their front doors with armed weapons to terrorize their children and their spouses, only in the end, of course, to have the case lost because there was nothing to it? Will you put an end to that kind of deliberate intimidation of the good American citizens on the basis of their religious beliefs?
Yes, Senator.
I'm glad to hear you say
Okay, let's talk about Mark Hawk. This is just what I found. He assaulted a 72-year-old Planned Parenthood worker. Co-founder of the King's Men Ministry. Who says the guns were pointed at Mark's wife says guns were pointed at the children. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Josh Hawley, that's when SWAT raids happen early in the morning so that you don't have all day to prepare yourself or to get wind or to, be alive and alert. Awake and alert, right? They want to take you early.
That because we need it. We need it. Ms. Bondi, we need a new chapter at the Justice Department, and we need it quickly. I'm glad you're committed to it. Now, I also have heard you've been asked about your comment that you thought that in some cases we need to investigate the investigators, the ones who were bad.
Maybe that's just...
I have to say, I'm glad to hear you stand by that. We need to do that. You need to do that. And I'll give you another example. I'm sure you've read about this memo, which I now hold in my hands. This memo that was developed by the FBI field office in Richmond, Virginia, 23rd January 2023, targeting Catholic parishes for spying, for recruitment of infiltrators. I mean, the memo goes on and on and on about the FBI's plans to put assets into Catholic parishes, into choirs. This is an unbelievable assault on Americans' First Amendment rights. And we only know of it because of a brave whistleblower who came forward and released it to us. And I will tell you, I have never been misled and lied to like I was by the current Attorney General and the now former FBI Director when they sat right where you're sitting now and told this committee, oh, we don't know anything about it. Oh, only one field office was involved. It was the single work of a single field office and a very few individuals. As it turns out, that's not true. Multiple field offices were involved. Multiple individuals were involved. Under your leadership, will you put a stop to the use of FBI or Department of Justice resources to try and recruit informants and spies into Christian churches or any church or house of worship in this country on the basis of nothing more than faith?
Of course, Senator.
Let me just say this. To our knowledge, no one who was involved in the writing and execution of this memo has been disciplined or fired. Will you conduct an investigation like you talked about, Ms. Bondi, that will get to the bottom of abuses like this? And to be clear, this is an outrageous abuse. It is an outrageous abuse. One of the worst abuses of Department of Justice and FBI authority in our history. Will you conduct an investigation to find out who signed off on this, who approved it, who advocated for it within the Department of Justice? Will you open the books on these abuses so that the American people can have confidence in their DOJ?
Senator, and I think what you're talking about is the ultimate weaponization, what we've been discussing all day. If I am confirmed as Attorney General, one of the first things I will do, there'll be many, but I will personally read that memo, and if Mr. Patel is confirmed, discuss it with him right away.
Fantastic. And will you work with this committee and our relevant subcommittees? I'm going to chair a subcommittee called the Crime and Terrorism Committee. We're going to do our own investigation into what happened here at the FBI and the DOJ. Will you work with us as you discover the nature of these abuses, and as you put a stop to them, will you work with us to make sure the American people get all the facts and this never happens again?
And Senator, yes, I look forward to working with you and the Democrats. I would think this is something that we can all agree on both sides, that this should not be happening in the United States of America, and work together on it.
That's fantastic. Let me ask you one other question here in my just few seconds that are remaining. This memo targeting Catholic parishes repeatedly refers to as an expert source a group called the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center has a long history as an anti-religious group that has repeatedly gone after conservative and religious organizations, called them hate groups, called them sometimes terrorist
Hey, you know what, Josh? You know who has a history of radicalizing young men and women in this country? Some churches in the South. No. No. No way. But yeah, it's the Poverty Law Center who are holding them accountable. Yeah, they're the problem. Oh, Holly.
Groups,
so
they're
twisted,
cited in this memo. They once infamously, the SPLC called the Family Research Council a terrorist hate group, and an armed gunman came into their lobby and opened fire. Will you put a stop to the use of the SPLC as an official source for any Department of Justice memorandum or finding?
That will be one of the first things we will look at as well, Senator, and report back to you and the committee.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank
you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, as you know, the Supreme Court in Trump versus United States held the president has absolute immunity to commit crimes in certain core areas of the president's responsibility. One of those core areas is the Justice Department. So in a breathtakingly dangerous and irresponsible decision, Justice Roberts and the majority held the president could commit crimes using the Department of Justice and be immune from prosecution. Justice Sotomayor correctly said this new immunity lies about like a loaded weapon. So the fear and the concern we have is that the incoming president will use that loaded weapon, that immunity, to commit crimes through the Department of Justice. And for that reason, it is all the more important that we have an Attorney General who has the independence, the strength, the intestinal fortitude to say no to the president when it is necessary. So my first set of questions has to do whether you have the independence to say no when you must say no. And you can say this is hypothetical, but it is not hypothetical. So let me start with one very specific non-hypothetical. The president has said Jack Smith should go to jail. Will you investigate Jack Smith?
Senator, I haven't seen the file. I haven't seen the investigation. I haven't looked at anything. It would be irresponsible of me to make a commitment regarding anything without, you're a long practicing attorney, without looking at a file.
So you would need a factual predicate to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
Not a summary by you sitting here. Yes, sir.
And not a summary by the president either, right?
Absolutely.
So a summary by the president or his desire to investigate Jack Smith would not be enough for you to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
I will look at the facts and evidence in any case.
And sitting here today,
Senator, 72% of Americans
I only have
have
7
lost
minutes.
faith in the Department of Justice.
Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Sitting here today, yes or no?
Senator, I will look at the facts and the circumstances.
You can't answer that question?
Brought to me.
You're not a part of the department yet. There's no worry about divulging
I'm sitting
law
here as a
enforcement
nominee.
sensitive information. So just tell us,
I'm
are you
sitting here as
aware?
a nominee.
Just tell us, are you aware of a factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Yes or no?
Senator, what I'm hearing on the news is
Are you aware of a?
Do I know if he committed a crime? I have not looked
You seem reluctant to answer a simple question. Let me ask you a different simple question. The president also wants to jail Liz Cheney. Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual basis to investigate Liz Cheney? Yes or no?
Senator, that's a hypothetical, and I'm not going to answer that question.
No, it's not hypothetical. I'm asking you, sitting here today, whether you are aware of a factual predicate to investigate Liz Cheney.
Senator, no one has
Based on
asked
what you
me
know.
to investigate Liz Cheney. That is a hypothetical.
The president has called for it publicly. You are aware of that, aren't you?
No one has asked me to investigate.
But the president
Liz.
has
We're
called,
also worried about Liz Cheney,
the
Senator.
president has
You know what
called
we
for
should
this.
be worried about?
Ms. Bondi,
the
please
crime rate
answer
in
my
California
questions.
right now
You
is
are
through
aware,
the roof.
Ms. Bondi,
Your robberies
Ms.
are
Bondi,
87% higher than the national average.
My question is this.
That's what I
My
want to
question
be
is
focused
this.
on, Senator.
Do you have the
if I'm
power to
confirmed
say
as
no to the
Attorney
president?
General.
And what you're suggesting today by your non-answer is you don't have the independence to say no to the president. So let me ask you a different question. It also requires you, if you're going to be a good attorney general, to be able to tell hard truths to the president. So my questions
now are, can you tell hard truths to the president? So let me start with an easy truth that you could speak to the president. Can you tell us, can you tell him that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election? Can you say that? Do you have the independence to say that? Do you have the gravitas, the stature, the intestinal fortitude to say, Donald Trump, you lost the 2020 election? Can you tell us that here today?
Senator, what I can tell you is I will never play politics. You're trying to engage me in a gotcha. I won't do it. I won't play politics with any ongoing investigation.
So let me ask you another.
Like you did leaking your colleague Devin Nunes's memo.
If you can't answer the question, let me ask you a different, what should be a simple truth, not a hard one. Was there massive fraud affecting the result of the 2020 election, yes or no?
Senator, I'm glad you asked that question, if you'll let me answer what I saw in Pennsylvania.
No, I asked a simple question about massive fraud.
I can only tell you what I saw in Pennsylvania.
I know you want to answer a different question, but my question is, can you tell us whether there was massive fraud affecting the results of the 2020 election, yes or no? Was there or was there not?
I can tell you what I saw when I went as an advocate to the campaign.
That's not my question. So you can't answer that question. You can't speak that even easy truth to us, let alone to the president. So let me ask you a different question. It will also be important that you give good advice to the president. Are you prepared to advise the president not to pardon people who beat police officers?
Senator, as I said, the pardons are at the direction of the president. We will look and we will advise. I will look at every case on a case.
So
let me finish. On a case-by-case basis.
Okay, good.
And I abhor violence to police officers.
Follow up with that. So will it be your advice to the president, Mr. President, I know you said you want to issue hundreds of pardons on day one. Will it be your advice to the president? No, Mr. President, I need to go over them on a case-by-case basis. Do not issue blanket pardons. Will that be your advice to the president?
Senator, I have not looked at any of those files. If confirmed, I will look at the files
and
for the pardons,
will you be able to review hundreds of cases on day one?
I will look at every file I am asked to look at.
Of course you won't. So will you advise the president?
Can I answer the question?
Well, my question is...
I would have plenty of staff. You said, of course you want?
You'll be able to review hundreds of cases on the first day?
I'm not going to mislead this body, nor you.
All right, let me ask another question. You don't want to answer that. Let me ask another question.
You were censured by Congress, Senator, for comments just like this that are so reckless.
It will also be important for you to be able to preserve the records, the evidence of the department. Are you ready to commit that none of the evidence in the January 6th investigation will be destroyed under your watch?
Senator, I will follow the law. I will consult with ethical officials in the department.
Do you see any ethical basis to destroy evidence in the January 6th investigation? Then why can't you answer the question? Why can't you say, I commit to this committee, we will never destroy the evidence in the January 6th investigation? Why can't you give this committee and the American people that assurance?
Are you frightened because evidence was destroyed against President Trump that was false? Is that why you're frightened now? I can't believe this is even...
Why do you have difficulty answering that question?
I can't believe you're asking such a question.
Why do you have difficulty promising to preserve evidence at the Department of Justice? Why is that a difficult question?
I will follow the law.
It shouldn't be a difficult question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, I know that you are pleased that we are moving to the end of round one. And we appreciate your being here. And I appreciate that you told my California colleagues you were willing to work with them, even in light of the manner in which they have approached you. Now, one thing I think we need to have everybody understand that is watching this hearing today and everyone sitting in here, what we have witnessed over the last 4 years with a weaponized DOJ. My colleagues have talked about this, and the American people know this. They know what was carried out against President Trump and his administration, and in November, they voted to see an end to 2 tiers of justice, 2 tiers of treatment, 2 tiers of access, because they have absolutely had it with the lies, with the accusations, and with the attacks that have come against so many people who were just seeking to live their lives, and then all of a sudden found the FBI or another federal agency or the DOJ knocking at their door. You know, Ms. Bondi, it would make you believe that my colleagues have learned nothing from the elections in November. They don't see this as a movie script that someone may have liked to write. What they see is this is real life. And they want a restoration to equal justice, equal access, equal treatment, abiding by the rule of law. Many of us have talked today about making America safe again. And in Tennessee, I hear a good bit about this. And as we've discussed your nomination, one of the things I've mentioned to people is your career as a prosecutor. And you have touched on that some today. And you are bringing that insight of being a prosecutor to bear. And I do appreciate that. Now, one thing that I think is noteworthy, and in preparation for the hearing, I looked some of these numbers up. During President Trump's first term, violent crime in this country actually fell. Yes. It fell by 17%. And in the first 2 years of the Biden administration, it soared by 43%. This is crime that is taking place in all of our communities. We've seen a rise, whether it's California or Tennessee. We have seen a rise. So I want you to talk to Tennesseans, to Californians, to all Americans about what you're going to do to get this crime rate down in this country.
Senator, thank you for that question. And despite the questions from Senator Schiff, I look forward to working with you and the state of California to do everything we can to fight violent crime in California. And you know as well as I, that crime is only going to go through the roof now after these forest fires. You're going to have looting. You're going to have price gouging. You're going to have so many things that I have dealt with in the state of Florida, and I am committed to working with California just as much as I am committed to working with you, Senator Kennedy, in the tragedy that just took place in Louisiana, given all the human beings that were murdered in your state. And we have the Super Bowl coming up in less than 3 weeks now, I believe, Senator. I've been a little busy. But we've got to ensure, if I'm confirmed, that everyone in this country is safe. And I will work with you. I will work with you, Senator. I will work with all of you in this country. For everything that Senator Blackburn said, we have got to reduce violent crime, and we have got to restore integrity to our law enforcement officers. Donald Trump, we keep saying he won this election by 77.3 million votes and 312 electoral votes. Look at the map of California, Senator Schiff. It's bright red, the popular vote, for a reason. People want law and order. They want to be safe so they can go to take their children to school, so they can go to church, Senator Hawley. People want safe streets. Of course we care about our economy and what's happening in this world.
Wait a minute. I thought you weren't going to be political at all. Oh, this sure sounds political, Pam.
But if we're not safe, none of that works. We have got to come together. We have got to work together to make America safe again. And that, in turn, will make America great again. And I don't know where that phrase has become a bad word, because I think that's a great one. Making America great again.
Let me move on with you to something else that's about law and order, and that is Section 1507. Because making certain that our justices are protected is important, and we also, with our judges, Section 1507 makes illegal any protest outside of a judge's residence if the intent is to influence the judge's decision-making. And we have heard about the protest outside of justices' homes. where they were shouting loud and clear things like, and I'm quoting some of that, "If you take away our choices, we will riot," end quote. Another one, "No privacy for us, no peace for you," end quote. In other words, if the justices did not vote to uphold Roe and Casey, the protesters would continue to harass them. Despite this clear violation of the law, Merrick Garland did not bring a single charge, not one single charge, under Section 1507. Will you commit to faithfully enforcing Section 1507 as Attorney General?
I will faithfully enforce that law and all laws that I am asked to review. And Senator, I watched that on TV and it horrified me, the protesters outside their houses. You can't do that for a reason, because our justices have to remain safe and unbiased and protected from threats, as do we all. But they do enjoy a special protection, and yes, that should be enforced.
And thank you, Ms. Bondi. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. We'll now have our second round that I announced earlier. We'll each have 4 minutes. When we were talking in my office, I brought up the importance of your listening to whistleblowers. And about 30 or 35 investigations I've got underway of the executive branch, and not just because of a Democrat president. Some of them are probably carryovers from Republican presidents. It's very important that the executive branch understand the cooperation that you must have with us to carry out our responsibilities to see that the president faithfully executes the laws. And I think that too often whistleblowers, being patriotic people they are, wanting government to do what government's just supposed to do, and find something wrong, they want to report it, and they want to report it within the agency. They don't come to Congress unless they don't get any help in the executive branch. It seems to me that it's very important that you respect whistleblowers, but I've seen them treated like a skunk at a picnic by the agency they're in. I've seen them ruin themselves professionally. I see themselves. One time an FBI agent came to me, was escorted out of headquarters with his gun and badge taken away from him, just because the laboratory there was not using science to make sure that crime was actually committed. So now we have a new $40 million head or science lab so that people are protected and get their constitutional rights. So will you protect whistleblowers from retaliation and promote a culture? And I think that last thing, promote a culture, is more important, that values the important contribution of whistleblowers.
Yes, and Senator, I think so people fully understand the importance of whistleblowers. They have to be able to tell the truth and come forward without fear of retaliation. And that's the purpose of the whistleblower statute.
And when there's retaliation, the taxpayers' money's paying for that retaliation in most cases. The Biden Justice Department issued guidance telling prosecutors to stop charging mandatory minimums and ignore laws setting penalties on drug type. It also allowed folks to pay civil and criminal fines to politicize non-government organizations instead of the government treasury. I put together a list of their guidance. I find it very concerning and unfair to the taxpaying public, and I'd like to have you review those policies very soon after you're confirmed.
Absolutely, Senator.
In regard to antitrust, enforcing antitrust laws is extremely important to ensure that markets are fair and that consumers are protected. I've been active in making sure that the Justice Department and the FTC carefully scrutinize mergers and that they look out for anti-competitive behavior and predatory practices. I keep a close eye on these issues as they impact my state of Iowa, and particularly agriculture, healthcare, and technology industries, and I'm interested in your commitment to make antitrust enforcement a priority.
Antitrust enforcement was a priority when I was a state AG, and it will be a priority if I am confirmed as Attorney General. And again, I am so proud to have Gail Slater handling that. She is
do you agree that?
Loved by both sides
Okay.
of the aisle.
Well, my time's up. Go ahead, Senator.
Go ahead if you want.
Okay. This is the Civil Rights Division in your department, if you're head of it, supposed to enforce laws against race and sex discrimination, but under the Biden administration, the Justice Department has arguably promoted discrimination and turned a blind eye to racist hiring practices. Do you agree that race and sex discrimination by employers is illegal, even if the discrimination is called diversity or equity?
No one should be discriminated against.
Okay, go ahead. I'm done.
You owe me 44 seconds. Ms. Bondi, I'd like to say something, and I hope you agree with it. Violence is never acceptable when it comes to political expression. Period.
I think I said that initially. Yes, I do agree. Of course I agree.
I abhor that sort of thing happening when it comes to conservative Supreme Court justices, and I abhor it when it comes to Nancy Pelosi's husband being attacked in his home.
That was horrible.
Which we should all say unequivocally both are unacceptable. I think you agree, correct?
Horrible.
All right. I guess as I reflect on what you've said today, a couple things surprised me. I did not expect you to be as outspoken as you are about Kash Patel. He's been characterized as a professional career defense attorney and a career prosecutor. That's a pretty amazing achievement in his life. But he also has said and done some things which are impossible to understand and justify. For example, are you familiar with something called the QAnon conspiracy?
I have heard of it, but I do not know what it is, but I've heard of it many times, Senator.
So let me tell you what I've learned about it. Its core belief is that a cabal of satanic, cannibalistic child molesters are embedded within our government and are conspiring against President-elect Trump. They asked Mr. Patel about it, and he said, quote, "I agree with a lot that the movement says." End of quote. Does that sound like a good preparation to run the FBI?
Senator, I don't know anything about, I had heard of QAnon, but I've never heard that definition attached to it at all. You're going to have to ask Mr. Patel about those statements.
We will. And I'll tell you, until we get answers to those questions, I don't know many people on this side of the table will give him an unequivocal endorsement. This and his enemies list, what he calls his government gangsters, this is what you expect of Stasi. This is what you expect of secret police. It is not what you expect of justice in America, as you've even described it at the table today. So I would say this unequivocal support of Mr. Patel should at least have some reservation until he explains some of these outrageous positions he has taken.
I look forward to hearing his testimony about QAnon in front of this committee.
You will. Let me say another word about January 6th and what happened. We lived through it, many of us. We'll never forget it. To think that the United States of America's Capitol building was desecrated by an insurrectionist mob that came in and did horrible things, particularly to our police force, that keeps you safe as you sit there and keeps us safe every single day. Over 100 of them were attacked by these demonstrators. One, Kenneth Bonowitz, a member of the so-called Proud Boys, another alt-right group, assaulted at least 6 officers, placed one in a chokehold and lifted him up by the neck. Bonowitz injured one officer so severely he had to retire. Kyle Fitzsimmons, convicted for 5 separate assaults against law enforcement, including one that caused a career-ending and life-altering injury to U.S. Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Ganell. Can you understand why when Donald Trump says, the day I am inaugurated as president, I will issue a blanket pardon to these, quote, political prisoners. We view this with an outrage on our side. These men and women risk their lives for us every day, and they almost died. Some of them did die in the course of this attack. Why aren't we treating them as such, and why do you have to reserve judgment? Vice President Vance didn't when he was asked this week. He said that pardon should not be extended to those who were guilty of violence against policemen.
Yeah, and Senator, I do not agree with violence against anyone, but especially police officers. And every time I've been walking through these halls, meeting with all of you, the men and women of the Capitol Police Department are incredible. They do a great job. They deserve to be safe. And I do not agree with violence against any police officer.
I would hope.
I never have, Senator.
You weren't able to answer my question affirmatively earlier, but I would hope that if this moves forward in a positive way on your nomination, you will speak up at some point on behalf of these police officers who are keeping you safe today and your family safe. I yield.
Okay. Before Senator Graham, I want to enter into the record without objection from the members of this committee letters from law enforcement groups who support Ms. Bondi's nomination. These groups include the Fraternal Order of Police, the National Sheriff's Association, the National Association of Police Organizations. They praise her, quote, support for law enforcement, crime prevention, and public safety, end of quote, without objection. So ordered. Senator Graham.
Thank you. Well, I've been gone for a while, so they're asking you about Kash Patel. It must be going pretty well.
You didn't miss anything, Senator.
So that's just an observation. So anyway, thanks to my colleagues on the Democratic side. It's been a good hearing. And a couple things. Pardons. If somebody applies for a pardon, you'll give the president legal advice as to whether or not he should grant it. Is that the way the system works?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. So rather than prejudging what you would do, you would look at the application and give him your best advice, and you don't like people who beat up cops.
Correct. I hope no one does.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. So let's just get back to the process.
I'm not going to speak for the president,
Yeah.
but the president does not like people that abuse police officers either.
Yeah, well, the hope is that through this pardon process, you'll make a rational decision based on the applicant rather than deciding the outcome in a Senate hearing. That's all I'm asking. That's what I would want if I represented somebody. I'd want at least to be heard. Now, Section 230, are you familiar with it?
Yes, Senator.
One thing that unites this committee is protecting children and society at large from social media abuse. We passed online privacy legislation. Senator Durbin's been great to work with. Everybody, Klobuchar, we're all trying to find out how to empower people who may be victims of social media. To empower a parent whose child's been bullied, when you call the social media platform and they blow you off, you go to court and they kick you out of court because of Section 230. Sexual exploitation of children on the internet. We've heard stories that make us just break our hearts. We're united of trying to give people a say. If they take your content down, you're appealing to the people who made the decision to take your content down. So what I want to do, along with Senator Hawley, everybody, is repeal Section 230 or replace it with a system that empowers consumers who may have been hurt. Do you agree with that?
Senator, I would love to look at that with you. I'm not familiar with what you want to do on the issue. I've talked to Senator Klobuchar. I think Senator Durbin and I may have even discussed it, but I'm committed to looking at that with you. There are so many issues online that's one of the things. We have to find things that can bring us together now, and this has to be one of them.
Well, just
protecting our children.
Here's what FBI director said. Ray, where you agree with him or not, I agree with this. I see blinking lights everywhere I turn regarding the national security threats. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, Senator. I was looking at that, the date of that. That was a year ago. Yes, Senator. I also heard about, I haven't seen it yet, his 60 Minutes interview that was very troubling to me for our country.
Right. We know we found 8 guys from Tajikistan that were released, caught again because they were tied to ISIS. So the point I'm trying to make is January 20th, we own this. I just urge you, to the extent you can, to urge the president to secure that border. We need money. The idea of moving money around from defense is not going to cut it. We need a lot of money for bed space, to finish the wall, do technology, hire ICE agents to accelerate deportation of people who are criminals and gang members. We don't have time to waste. I hope you'll make that an urgency, because the threat is real. Are you worried about an attack on our homeland being generated from ISIS or their affiliates, and what should we do about it?
Senator, I don't have a security clearance yet, but only from the public reporting that I've seen, I'm terrified.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to try to fit in 2 questions in my 4 minutes. Lindsay, stick around because I'm going to say something nice about you. First, yes to 230. We've got to really work on that. There's a lot of support for fixing 230, in fact, outright repealing 230 in this committee. First question. Presumably, your commitment to fairly enforcing the law based on facts and evidence would also apply to environmental cases.
Yes, Senator.
I'm concerned because, under Trump, criminal prosecutions for pollution dropped sharply in his first term. And you will be running an Environment and Natural Resources Division that has things like, for instance, a methane task force that big polluters who spent big money to get President Trump reelected don't like. And they're going to be coming to you to say, hey, we don't want a whole lot of enforcement on this. Methane leaks, carbon dioxide leaks, it's a pollutant, polluting our water, polluting our air. Will you be strong when that happens?
Senator, if you haven't learned yet, I'm pretty strong and I'm pretty independent. And I will, I think you and I spoke about this in your office a bit. I don't know a lot about that issue, but I am committed to meeting with the ENRD division and talking to you about it. I wish I knew more about the issue you faced, but I don't. But I'm committed to absolutely looking at it and doing what I can to help you in your state.
I don't want environmental prosecutions to be an ignored stepchild subset. It's law just like any other law. The second question that I'd like to get to goes back to Chairman Grassley's opening comments, that it's going to be really important for the Department of Justice, under your leadership, to answer questions from senators, both Republican and Democrat, and to give us real answers. Sometimes the best oversight comes from the other party. And indeed, sometimes the best oversight comes from one senator who sticks to one issue and persists at it without necessarily support from the rest of the committee. And that oversight has been really consequential in the past, and it's really important. So Chairman Grassley has been very good about trying to enforce that rule. And I want to tell you just a quick story about something that went the wrong way, I believe. Crossfire Hurricane was mentioned by Senator Graham. There was a committee investigation into Crossfire Hurricane. During that Crossfire Hurricane investigation, box loads of material was provided by the department and the Bureau to Senate Republicans. They got files, they got investigative reports, they got internal memos, they got stuff that would not be FOIA-able. They really were able to do a deep dive because they got everything they asked for, even stuff that the FBI would ordinarily not produce. That was happening on that side of the aisle. For me, I had questions about Justice Kavanaugh's supplemental background investigation. And I asked for things like, what is the Department of Justice policy for how tip lines work? That's a FOIA-able question. I didn't get a single piece of paper. I asked for things like, what are the ground rules for investigations of supplemental background investigations. I didn't get a single piece of paper. Senator Graham called the Deputy Attorney General up into his office to say, will you guys please knock it off and give this guy some information? So, you know, I have lived the example of if you're a Republican on this committee in a Republican administration, you get everything you ask for and more. And if you're a Democrat, you get zero. That was not a great moment for me and not a great moment for the department. And so I will take the chairman at his word that he wants the department to be responsive to requests from all of us. And I would ask you, will you be responsive to all of us, irrespective of our party affiliation, if we are asking legitimate questions that you have the power to answer?
Senator, I think I've said that from the beginning. Yes, especially on Freedom of Information Act, I will follow the laws that apply to the Freedom of Information Act. I believe in that. I actually dealt with the public records when I was a state prosecutor. It's been so long ago, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
So I handled all the public records.
One just sort of point of order here. The FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act process is one thing. Anybody can get information under the Freedom of Information Act process. As senators, we should be able to do better than that. When we're doing worse than that, that's a sign that somebody's hiding something. When we're doing better than that, that's a good thing for congressional oversight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator, tell us.
Can we take a minute off Senator Schiff, since I'm joking? Since he took an extra minute, I'm joking.
Yes, you can. You wanted to say something to Senator Schiff?
No, sir. I asked if we could take a minute off Senator Schiff since Senator Whitehouse took an extra minute. I was teasing. I'm sorry.
Okay. Senator, tell us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, I wanted to come back, and I'm glad I did because I got another mark on my bingo card. QAnon came up. It's a little known fact, but the so-called, I think I heard someone say that that's an organization, a cabal that has cannibalistic tendencies. I don't know if y'all know this. It's a well-documented fact that the so-called QAnon shaman is a vegetarian who actually had to be transferred to another prison to satisfy his dietary needs after being sentenced to 41 months in prison. So I don't know if all the QAnon people are cannibals, but it's a little bit absurd. I just wanted to add a little levity here and let y'all know I'm one mark away from hitting bingo. Yeah, but you know, it's important to talk about this, folks, because this is the part I don't like about the big committee. I love intellectual property subcommittee because we don't get into this theater. But it's just absurd to think that, and it was mentioned in reference to a comment that Kash Patel made, who I spoke with earlier today. You know, it's just absurd to kind of throw that stuff out there. Does anybody honestly believe someone with a distinguished career like Kash Patel thinks that a cannibalistic cabal controlling the internals of government really exists? Let me give you an example why I resist that notion. I resist the notion that most of the members here, who all raise tens of millions of dollars through Act Blue, that has a subpage that only until Senator Butler finally told them to take it down, after I spent a year ranting about it, on Act Blue, a subpage on Act Blue had the all cops are bastards subpage and fundraising drive. I came to this committee for a year and tried to encourage my members to say, this is absurd. So would it be fair for me to say that President Biden is embracing an organization that thinks all cops are bastards and you should have a fundraising run for 13.12 miles and protest outside of police departments and put pressure on them? Saying that President Trump or you or anybody else or somehow or Kash Patel have an allegiance, it's so absurd to think in a big hearing like this, we actually just talked about that we actually think someone of the stature and the experience that would come before this committee would actually think a bunch of people-eating cabals controlling the innards of government was real. That's just being done. I get the theatrics. I get the marketing department thought it'd be really cool if it was said. But guys, that's not us at our best. And I just thought it was kind of funny that he's a vegetarian too. But I want to go back This is a narrative that people are going to force, and I'm going to trust you to do what you do as a prosecutor. Like you said earlier, you're going to examine the facts of a case. You're going to give the president your best advice. I cannot believe if there is compelling evidence that you as a prosecutor know that this person breached the Capitol and injured a police officer, that the president would even ask you to consider it. And I certainly can't imagine you recommending that they move forward. It's a hypothetical. I don't want you to respond to it, but track record as a prosecutor would suggest otherwise. Last question. You mentioned that when you were dealing with some of the opioid challenge, I think it was opiates, Oxycontin, I believe you mentioned, that you went up against your own party or you got some pushback from your own party. Would you explain how you have looked at your party and done the courageous thing of speaking truth to them?
Oh, I remember when that started. Several of my former colleagues are behind me. They're probably smiling, but I remember when that started, I said, "Ooh, I'll never get elected to a second term," because yes, I fought for what I believed in based on meeting these victims' families and seeing the need, and I fought the industry. Whew, that was a big industry, and the doctors.
You were in an elected position with a lot of people with a target on you, and you stood firm. Thank you.
More than once, Senator. Thank you.
Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. Attorney General Bondi, in our previous conversation, we talked about criminal justice reform, and in particular, your contribution to the enactment of the First Step Act in the previous Trump administration. And I just want to talk with you about a couple of bipartisan initiatives in this area. Senators Cornyn, Lee, Durbin, Tillis, Booker, and I have introduced a bipartisan bill called the Safer Supervision Act. It focuses on the fact that federal probation officers have a massive caseload, often more than 100 folks they are supposed to be closely supervising. And this bill would work on focusing supervised release resources on those who really need it and creating positive incentives for those who are willing and able to be rehabilitated and leave prison much less likely to reoffend. What's your experience about the need to support people when they get out of prison and to provide them with positive incentives rather than just leaving them to their own free will and the very high likelihood they may reoffend and thus violate public safety concerns?
Yeah, and Senator Coons, that's why reentry, we call it, halfway houses, what you need, Senator Welch, are so important because many people deserve to go to prison, but many people are going to get out of prison. And
almost all.
We don't want a revolving door. We want to do everything we can to make productive members of society. And when someone goes to prison, I saw this every day. You saw this as a revolving door. People get out. And first of all, I back up. We need drug programs. I could go on. We need drug programs, more drug programs in our prison. We have to. Mental health, we would be here for another 2 days. We have to get more mental health in our prison system, counseling to help people. I think our local jails actually do a better job of it, at least in Florida. But we've got to work on that because when people get out, we expect them to do well. Many people don't even know how to go get a driver's license, yet we're telling you, go get a job, have a place to live. So we have to do everything we can to help.
If I could move to the driver's license question. I've also led a bipartisan bill with Senator Wicker. Senator Grassley is also a co-sponsor. It's called the Driving for Opportunity Act. And it recognizes that in many states there is a practice of suspending driver's licenses where someone is too poor to pay their court-related or public safety-related fines and fees, but where the driver's license isn't suspended because they're dangerously driving. It's just because they haven't paid their fines and fees. And then without a driver's license, they lose their job or they're not able to get a job. Would you be willing to work with this bipartisan group of us on these two bills, Driving for Opportunity and the Safer Supervision Act?
I would love to read both of them, and I was unaware of that happening with driver's license.
Last two questions. Clemency, as we discussed, often near the end of an administration, there's a rush to consider pardons. Would you be willing to work at a more institutionalized clemency process where there aren't just lots of commutations near the end of a term, but where there's a regular process where the DOJ and the clemency process is looked at to see whether there are reforms that should be made and recommendations that could be made to the president throughout his term?
I would love to look at that process. I can tell you that the pardons, the commutations that Joe Biden just made were abhorrent to me, absolutely abhorrent, taking people off death row. I looked at the facts of many of those cases, and they were so troubling to me. I don't know what process you intend to implement, but I would love to study that with you.
Well, we talked positively about your experience and mine with drug courts, veterans courts, mental health courts. There are some things we will continue to disagree about, and other things I hope we can work on together. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, as you're aware, criminal justice reform has been an important part of my role on this committee. I worked for the better part of a decade with Senator Durbin, Chairman Grassley, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Cornyn, Senator Booker, and a bunch of others to eventually pass the First Step Act, which President Trump signed into law in December of 2018. The First Step Act, as the name implies, was intended to be the first of multiple steps. Much remains to be done, including with the implementation of the First Step Act. The credits available under the First Step Act are still being implemented and need more. I assume you'd be willing, if confirmed, to help us continue to implement the First Step Act.
Yeah, yes, Senator. And also, I just learned, it's my understanding, I don't know for fact, but it's my understanding that a lot of those beds for halfway houses, for reentry, have not been filled under the First Step Act. So if that's true, I want to look at that right away and figure out why.
Right. And I think other reforms like the Safer Supervision Act, of which I'm a co-sponsor, can also be helpful on that front. It's always important to make sure that we're running, although ours is not the largest criminal law enforcement institution in the country, meaning the states themselves have far more criminal cases, far more prisoners under their jurisdiction collectively than the United States government does. And nonetheless, it is a significant presence. And states often look to the federal government, sometimes for good, other times for ill, on leadership as to where they should take their own criminal justice system. And so it's important that we get this right, and especially given that we've been wrong at times in the past. I also think it's important to address the topic of overcriminalization. A few years ago, a few of us on this committee decided that we wanted to find out how many federal crimes are on the books. We reached out to the Congressional Research Service, the CRS, whose job it is to answer such questions like this when members have these questions. The answer that came back was stunning. The answer that came back was to the effect that the answer is unknown and unknowable, but at least 300,000. A lot of the reason for this is that there are a lot of instances in which federal regulations impose criminal penalties. Impose criminal penalties often without Congress independently enacting anything, just using some sort of delegated lawmaking authority from Congress, which ought not be okay, but incorporating elements of a criminal offense into a criminal regulation, which we add to the Code of Federal Regulations at a clip of around 100,000 pages a year, give or take, depending on which parts of the Federal Register that you add to the CFR at the end of each year. This seems highly problematic to me for multiple reasons. Reason number one, of course, are that Article 1, Sections 1 and 7 make clear that you cannot make a federal law or change a federal law without Congress, without both houses of Congress passing the same text, submitting it to the president. Reason number two, oftentimes when this happens, you end up with an either absent or hugely ambiguous mens rea, meaning the standard of intent with which one must have acted in order to commit the criminal offense in question is often absent or at least so murky that nobody can tell what it means. Both of these things, of course, lead to huge problems for defendants and for the liberty interests of the American people. So I'd ask that you, if confirmed, help work with us on these things and share any thoughts you might have on them.
Yes, Senator, and I wasn't aware of the mens rea issue, yes.
Senator Klobuchar.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for mentioning antitrust. I'm really proud of the work you and I have done together, as well as Senator Lee and I. And I know we discussed with you, Ms. Bondi, the work on allowing state AGs, a bill that Senator Lee led, and I was the Democratic lead on letting state AGs keep the antitrust cases involving tech in their states. And Senator Grassley and I successfully passed our bill to finally update the merger fees, which have allowed larger mergers have to pay in more, smaller mergers less, and that has led, along with other reasons, to beef up the antitrust division of antitrust during the last few years. And I want to make sure that you are committed to continuing a strong antitrust division with adequate personnel.
And if I am confirmed, I intend on bringing in Gail Slater. She is amazing, and I think bipartisan support for her, and did a lot of antitrust. I had someone who knew antitrust much better than I when I was state attorney general, and it's very important.
But how about the resources for the division? It has been under this administration, the current outgoing one, they have added lawyers and others to it. And my question was is if you'll continue that.
Yes, I was actually looking at the structure of that unit, and if I am confirmed, I've been a little busy. I plan on working with Gail Slater and all the lawyers in that unit.
Okay. And then just you and I discussed some of the important cases, the Google case, Live Nation, Ticketmaster, the Apple case, I don't know if we talked about that one, but RealPage. And will you commit to continue these cases and to pursue remedies that will fully protect consumers from anti-competitive conduct? I'm not asking what the result will be. I can imagine you couldn't answer that, but I'm just asking that under if you are confirmed that you will continue the work on these cases.
Yes, Senator, I haven't looked at those on a case-by-case basis, but I'm committed to that type of case and protecting consumers. And I will look at that and have that unit look at that right away.
Thank you. At its founding in 1870, the Justice Department's priority was to enforce civil rights. That's what was founded, the reason guaranteed by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments during Reconstruction. Today, civil rights enforcement is led by the Civil Rights Division. Do you believe
Good afternoon. It's a very good afternoon because at long last I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. For more than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th, more than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people, more than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families. The elements of this deal were what I laid out in detail this past May, which was embraced by countries around the world and endorsed overwhelmingly by the UN Security Council. The deal is structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. And I'm proud to say Americans will be part of that hostage release in Phase 1 as well. And the Vice President and I cannot wait to welcome them home. In exchange, Israel released hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. And during Phase 1, the Palestinians can also return to their neighborhoods in all the areas of Gaza. And the surge of humanitarian assistance into Gaza will begin. And the innocent people can have a greater access to these vital supplies. You know, during the next 6 weeks, Israel will negotiate the necessary arrangements to get Phase 2, which is a permanent end of the war. Let me say it again, a permanent end of the war. There are a number of details to negotiate to move from Phase 1 to Phase 2, but the plan says if negotiations take longer than 6 weeks, the ceasefire will continue as long as the negotiations continue. I've spoken to the Emir of Kuwait and the President of Egypt, and we have pledged to make sure the negotiations will keep moving forward for as long as it takes. Then, when phase 2 begins, there will be an exchange for release of the remaining living hostages, including male soldiers, and all remaining Israeli forces will be withdrawn from Gaza, and the temporary ceasefire will become permanent. And finally, phase 3, any final remains of hostages who have been killed will be returned to their families, and a major reconstruction plan for Gaza will begin. This is the ceasefire agreement I introduced last spring. Today, Hamas and Israel have agreed to that ceasefire agreement and the whole ending the war. You know, those of you who have followed the negotiations can attest, the road to this deal has not been easy. I've worked in foreign policy for decades. This is one of the toughest negotiations I've ever experienced. And we reached this point because of the pressure that Israel built on Hamas, backed by the United States. Hamas's longtime leader, Sinwar, was killed. Hamas's strongest supporter, Iran, launched attacks on Israel. And those attacks failed after my administration organized a coalition of nations to stop them. And after I ordered the U.S. ships and planes to come to Israel's defense, we also shaped Israel's strong and calibrated response, destroying Iran's air defenses, but avoiding an escalatory cycle of an all-out war. The United States also organized a coalition of 20 countries to stand up to attacks by the Houthis, including their missile attacks in Israel. Then, Hezbollah, another of Hamas's strongest backers, was significantly weakened on the battlefield, and its leadership was destroyed. With our support, Israel negotiated a ceasefire with them, and after that, Lebanon finally elected a new president who's not beholden to Hezbollah, and he can begin a new chapter for the Lebanese people. All told, these developments in the region, which the United States helped to shape, changed the equation. And so now, the terror network that once protected and sustained Hamas is far weaker. Iran is weaker. Iran is weaker than it's been in decades. Hezbollah is badly degraded. And after more than 15 months of war, Hamas's senior leaders are dead. Thousands of Hamas fighters are dead. And the military formations have been destroyed. With nowhere to turn, Hamas finally agreed to releasing hostages. You know, there was no other way for this war to end than with a hostage deal. And I'm deeply satisfied this day has finally come, for the sake of the people of Israel and the families waiting in agony, and for the sake of the innocent people in Gaza who suffered unimaginable devastation because of the war. The Palestinian people have gone through hell. Too many innocent people have died. Too many communities have been destroyed. In this deal, the people of Gaza can finally recover and rebuild. They can look to a future without Hamas in power. You know, the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. Many peacemakers helped make this deal happen, including an extraordinary team of American diplomats who have worked nonstop for months to get this done. Secretary Blinken led the effort. Secretary Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Bill Burns, John Feiner, Brett McGurk, Amos Hochstein, and the Vice President worked relentlessly as we work to deliver this deal. I'd also note this deal was developed and negotiated under my administration, but its terms will be implemented, for the most part, by the next administration. In these past few days, we've been speaking as one team. This has been a time of real turmoil in the Middle East. But as I prepare to leave office, our friends are strong, our enemies are weak, and there's a genuine opportunities for a new future. In Lebanon, there's an opportunity for a future, free from the grip of Hezbollah. In Syria, a future free from the tyranny of Assad. And for the Palestinian people, a credible pathway to a state of their own. And for the region, a future of normalization, integration of Israel and all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia. At the G20 in Delhi in September 23, I rallied key countries behind a vision of an economic corridor from India across the Middle East to Europe. That vision can now become a reality. There are risks as well, including ISIS and Iran, even in a badly weakened state. But we're handing off then to the next team a real opportunity for a better future for the Middle East. I hope they will take it. Let me close with this. My friend for years in the United States Senate, former Senator George Mitchell, who did so much to forge peace in Northern Ireland, once said about diplomacy, he said, it is a 700 days of failure and 1 day success. 700 days of failure and 1 day success. Well, we've had many difficult days since Hamas began its terrible war. We've encountered roadblocks and setbacks. We've not given up. And now, after more than 400 days of struggle, a day of success has arrived. God bless all the hostages and their families. May God protect the troops of all those who work for peace.
Mr. President, how do you see the future of Gaza now, as we're seeing the implementation of this deal will be in the hands of the next administration, and basically they will shape the future of Gaza. So how do you see this future? And also, how much credit do you give to the Trump team for this deal? Trump's already taking credit for it.
Well, you know, this is the exact framework of the deal I proposed back in May. Exact. And we got the world to endorse it. Secondly, it's America's support for Israel that helped them badly weaken Hamas and its backers and create the conditions for this deal. And thirdly, I knew this deal would have to be implemented by the next team. So I told my team to coordinate closely with the incoming team to make sure we're all speaking with the same voice, because that's what American presidents do. Thank you. All the exact detail of how many people are being held, how many bodies will be returned and less, will all be forthcoming. All of it, all of it. Thank you. I'm confident. Thank you. Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
Wow. Okay. Big moment. Huge moment for what was the darkest aspect of President Biden's term. This war has devastated that region. Lives and families and everything has been crushed. And this is what an amazing way to end your presidency by not only bringing light to that region, some semblance of hope to that region, and the families who have lost loved ones, also the families who have, their loved ones who are still hostages there, knowing that they'll be coming home. Just what an exclamation point on the end of President Biden's term. Now, I want to make a couple points there. President Biden thanking the team of people who did this, led by Secretary of State Blinken.
Figure that make you feel at home.
Naming them by name. And also, talking about how he brought Trump's team along in the negotiations because they're going to have to be the ones who are going to orchestrate all of this under the guidelines that they set up. You know, we're not going to see leadership like that in the next 4 years, and who knows who will win in 2028. But what a solid reminder of the type of leadership that President Biden has worked with, and what how he's implemented and how he sees the world, how he sees the presidency, and the importance of, you know, that it isn't just a President Biden win, that this is a win for the country, and it's going to take Trump's cabinet working to get this done. Now, we all know what's going to happen, right? We all know that President Biden got up there. His team has been spearheading this. They've gotten it done. But we know that when these hostages come home, that Donald Trump is going to claim that he did it. He did it all. And he'll throw Biden and his team under the bus without any issue. And so it's just another reminder of what real leadership looks like, and the vacuum of leadership that we're going to see over the next 4 years. Yeah, huge moment for President Biden and his team as they plan in the coming days to exit. Now let's get back to Pam Bondi's Senate confirmation hearing.
One of the suggestions of my colleagues, I wrote it down. He said he was concerned that, quote, you would start with a name to prosecute and then look for a crime, unquote. It made me immediately think of District Attorney Bragg in New York, who actually in 2019 ran a campaign in large part suggesting that if you elect me, I'll prosecute Donald Trump.
I believe there were others as well, Senator.
Right. How long were you a prosecutor?
18 years.
Okay. Is there anything in your background to suggest that my colleague's suggestion that you would start with a name and then look for a crime, is there anything in your background that would give him basis to say that?
No, Senator.
Okay. Have you ever done that?
No, Senator. And I think I have a lot of former colleagues sitting behind me who would back me up on that as well.
Do you plan to do that as Attorney General?
Of course not, Senator. I hope no Attorney General going forward would ever do that.
Okay, I mean, while this is pretty...
Well,
this is
thank you
very
for your time
important
today.
for our country.
One need not be
here.
clairvoyant to see that you're going to be confirmed.
Let's get to...
And,
let's see, sorry about this. Let's get to...
You talked a lot about bringing us together today. I'll make this suggestion. Senator Durbin talked about it.
CNN's
you
coverage
can bring us together if you just
deal, and what exactly we're gonna see here. That's not what I want. Come on. Okay. I don't know what YouTube TV is doing here. Let's see. Bear with me. Okay, if CNN's stream isn't going to work, maybe I can get... Maybe MSNBC has something. They're definitely talking about it.
You know, Chris, look, I mentioned it a moment ago as well. American foreign policy is at its best when it's bipartisan. And what we're seeing is that obviously President Biden and his team, they've been working this for months on end, and they are the primary ones at the table for the United States. But there is also President-elect Trump's team. Steve Witkoff, the person he appointed, has been reinforcing President Biden's message. And this may be, quite frankly, the best, if not the only example of cooperation between Trump trans.
There we are.
People in this area do have generators, so they are prepared. If a fire were to break out and they had to leave, people I spoke with in Ramona say they are ready for that as well.
Been ready for things like that just because of the, with California having, the fires, and it's a normal thing, especially living out.
Of hostages. And then, frankly, Hamas broke it and they started attacking again. And this is going to require, and I think you got to it on the earlier panel, some real authority inside of Gaza, quite frankly, someone to ensure that Hamas and the outside groups, the other ones that it's been talking to, like the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, with whom it needs to coordinate to get hostages back, that those groups do not become spoilers. This is the Hamas way of being a spoiler. And so this really does put the pressure on Qatar and on Egypt in particular to reinforce to Hamas that it has no room to do anything to restart hostilities after this first period.
Joel Rubin, thank you. It's always good to see you. And now I want to bring in David Rhodes, Senior Executive Editor for National Security for NBC News. You have a unique perspective, as many of our viewers know, because you were held hostage. And we were talking a little bit earlier about that moment that we hope will indeed happen when we see the first round of hostages released. It's as fresh in my mind as I'm sure it is in yours, the last time it happened, and the joy that you feel, the relief you feel. But we're going to learn a lot about what these 467 days have been like, what it was like for them when they were taken hostage, what it's been like for them to even survive under the conditions that we have some inkling that they have been held under. So what do you think we will learn, and what could that mean for the road going forward? And what are the political implications, frankly, for both sides?
It's extraordinary that these, the talk is roughly 33 people have survived what has gone on, 15 years of sort of all-out, 15 months of all-out warfare. And for their families also, I've talked about this before, it's terrible on the hostages, obviously, but for these families that have been tortured every day, thinking that they should somehow get to Bibi Netanyahu, get to Joe Biden and bring them home. Finally, this could come to an end. There's other families who've already lost their loved ones.
Let's see.
Died in captivity. So it's an extraordinary moment. But I agree, as everyone has mentioned, there's a danger here of spoilers. There's a danger of this unraveling. But it's unquestionably a momentous day for these hostages and for their families.
And what do they face when they come back? And again, we can only hope that this holds long enough that the hostages can be released.
They'll be thrilled at first. They'll struggle with a lot of trauma after that.
Unwatchable.
And
okay,
as hostage taking has become
Lenny,
more common, there's actually a community
and checking out the
of
live
former
stream.
hostages.
I'm
private here in the United States, but also of families that help each other and get them through this transitions, and they will rebuild their lives. It's a common thread I've seen among former hostages, that this is part of your life, this is a chapter of your life. But you don't want it to define you. You don't want to let these hostage takers define who you are. So a lot of struggle ahead, but a lot of joy ahead also.
On any future
Talk about the long term for these hostages, for the help that they can get, but also the security.
Thanks to Lenny and Steph. Yeah.